Welcome everybody to a very special stream and video. Star Trek Voyager Elite Force is now celebrating 25 years. For many of us, Elite Force is just not a game. It's a milestone in Star Trek gaming, from intense phaser fights to amazing community maps and mods. And well, to honor this special day, I thought, hey, let's invite some of the greatest veterans of the community. And yeah, hello guys. How are you doing?
Hello, doing good, thanks. Glad to be here.
I hope you guys still play Elite Force.
Of course.
Yeah, from time to time, yeah.
Hi, my name is Thilo. To be brutally honest myself, I don't play too much Elite Force any longer, but I created the port of the Elite Force, of the Quake 3 engine for Elite Force. This is probably why I'm here today.
Oh yes, Saturn is very happy about that fact. And yeah, since you already jumped into that topic, let's make a small introduction round.
Okay, well, I'm Deep Space Luke. On the Elite Force community, I was known as Luke 2.0 and the 10th Doctor and several other names. And I was a long-time player of the game, and at one point I was one of the administrators of Elite Force Files. I really enjoyed playing this game for a very long time, got quite heavily involved in the serial role plays on RPGX. And I really love this game. I think this is the game that really got me into video gaming, because I was a Star Trek fan beforehand. So this was definitely my gateway into video gaming, and it still has a very, very special place in my heart. And I'm really amazed that we're at the 25-year anniversary, but it's great to be celebrating it with like-minded people.
And if I remember correctly, you also were part of a YouTube channel where you did some reviews and events.
Yeah, John Fisher's Elite Force review. We did quite a few episodes of that, and my main contribution, apart from a few reviews, was that I would do the final thought at the end of the episode, where I would try and do some sort of comedy or review some sort of part of the Elite Force community, and poke fun at that a little bit, and just try to chronicle some of that, which was always a lot of fun.
Oh, should I go next?
Oh, yes.
Go for it.
Nice to meet you all. My name's Danny. I was known as File Tracker back in the day on Elite Force Files, EF Files. I'm the co-owner of Gamefront.com, and that used to be known as Filefront, and that used to be known as Files Network, and that used to host EFFiles.com. So it's a very complicated chain there as to how that came about. But it's all still there at Gamefront. I also, these days, still do a lot of modding stuff. So I most recently was part of Team Fallout, so I worked on Fallout London, and I also work for Mod.io these days, which is a company founded by my friend Scott Rees-Manis, who is the founder of ModDB. So I'm working with like game studios like GSC Game World and Larian on games like Baldur's Gate 3, and bringing mod support to consoles, which is really cool. So I'm still doing the modding thing, but just more officially these days. That's me. Nice.
Modding on consoles, that sounds complex. We definitely have to get in touch to you again.
I could chew your ear off about that, but that's not what we're here for, so.
Yeah, definitely we will come back to you. But yeah, let's move on to maybe the veteran of the RPGX community.
That'd be me. So my name is Tom. I was going to say I was known as Simo 666. I think changed the number to slightly these days. But yes, I was one of the early administrators of the Elite Role Playing group, and a veteran of what the EF Mods forums, and was, I guess, regularly involved in helping with making LCARS textures and graphics for quite a few of the maps in the role-playing space. Not doing a whole lot of Elite Force stuff these days, but had a great bit of nostalgia earlier on, looking through some of the maps and trying to get it working again these days. But some very good memories coming back from that.
Luckily, that's very easy. The Quake engine is, basically you can't kill it. It runs and runs, not like other games.
Indeed.
I can interject here. For this evening, I was just 3 hours ago going over the old code. Last port I did in 2016 of the engine with the latest patches from what I did. I just compiled it 9 years later, still compiled with the newest compiler. I opened it up, it ran without any problem. So I can only say this is really a marvel.
And before he says something, I also, of course, say hello to Seven Saturn again. Not only my co-host on multiple videos here, but also a very, very big fan of Elite Force. And I would also say of you, Thilo, because he likes to customize the game a lot. And yeah, I guess he likes binaries.
I wouldn't go that far. Actually, I don't really do changes of code, but I'm currently touching that topic. I'm building stuff, and yeah, I'm actually really a big fan. I was there when the first binaries came out with a ioQuake based EF, and it was like, okay, someone really had a lot of time for that, and I'm really, really thankful, because it put us into a situation today that we have a secure and safe Elite Force, without the security bugs and all the issues that were still in the engine in the game when it was released. And today you can feel rather safely using those, playing the game, and okay, it's not someone messing around with me or with my server, and making the game essentially also playable on other platforms. I can play this game on Linux, Mac OS, Windows, and if I'm really into it, also on my Raspberry if I want to. And this wouldn't be possible without someone having invested all this time. And so, yeah, other people I think have taken up improving it some more, mostly merging fixes and changes from the ioQuake engine over there, because it's still an ongoing thing, of course. And for me, mostly I'm just building binaries for the community, because yeah, I know it is easy to build for someone who knows what they're doing there, but the average guy will probably have some trouble doing that. And so yeah, this is mostly my part. Every now and then looking, are there some changes? Okay, let's build a new one, and giving people the opportunity to enjoy these means of modern EF gaming, so to say.
Yes, of course. Thanks. And this was really my hope, obviously, that this would be carried forward. And I myself, I played Elite Force really, really a lot. Like 15 years ago, I played it for a very long time. And this was just kind of a natural outcome that I was seeing, okay, the Quake 3 engine is being released open source, and I thought, how easy would it be to get HoloMatch to run with this kind of stuff? Before I go too deep now, I'd like to refer back to Captain Sidaris, because this whole thing, this is just kind of a fantastic trip down memory lane with all those names that have been dropped right in the beginning, because when you said file front and EF files and stuff, I was on all those sites looking for maps and looking at the news and blog posts and what was going on there. Of course, I was looking at those sites too. A colleague of mine, Jörg Dubiel was his name, and myself, I ran the German webpage hazardteam.de for a very long time, which was the resource for German-speaking Elite Force players for a long time. But before I go on for too long, I'd just like to defer back to you, Captain Sidaris. How am I supposed to call you, actually?
Sidaris or Captain Sidaris or
Team Killer. Team Killer is the actual term.
Yeah, Master Team Killer, please, if you want to be correct.
Or
I know
Captain Colorblind.
Master Team Killer. No, I'm pretty sure. I must have played a couple times against you, even with my own clan. I'm pretty sure about this one.
The problem is always in the internet, you can't stick with one nickname forever. You have to change it sometimes, because my original nickname was very bad. It was basically Captain Cisco, and yeah, surprise, surprise, it was always taken. I had to change it.
I was always Thilo, always. So maybe someone still remembers playing against me on Elite Force servers. Maybe, just maybe. Okay, enough from me now.
Yeah, but
No, what's really funny
honest,
about my username though, like, oh, sorry, I didn't mean to cut you off, but
go ahead.
just on the subject of usernames, that the reason that I picked the username File Trekker was purely just a concatenation of File Front and Star Trek, so Trekker. And I've just used that username ever since and never felt the need to change it. It's never taken anywhere. I can't think why. But I do find it's really cool when I'm like working on more recent modern stuff, like that I still use that username. and I kind of like that because it's kind of carries a little bit of that whole history of what we did back in the day with Elite Force and everything else kind of forward, and so I kind of keep hold of it. It's a bit nostalgic.
No, I like it. I think it's a great name, and it's definitely one that is very specific to that era and comes from that era, and it's certainly one that I remember from back in the day. And you're definitely a Trekker then, not a Trekkie. Is that your choice?
It's purely because I think it sounds a bit better. Like I don't have a stance on the Trekkie versus Trekker debate. Call yourself what you like, but I don't know. I just thought it had a better ring to it. So Al Trekkie would be a bit weird, I think.
I like it as it is. It's great. I went through quite a few names when I first started playing. I mean, I'm pretty sure my first Holo matches where I was just Redshirt, the default name and the Holo match for the character. But yeah, I was Luke 8-0 to begin with. Then I was Luke 2-0. I don't really remember why I changed that, or it was very much the era on the internet of having a number after your name. And so I think for whatever reason, that just stuck for a while. And then I was a big Doctor Who fan, so I had that as my username on a lot of the forums of the day, like Holo Federation, which I would say was my role-playing RPGX clan. And then I moved on to the social media era and my YouTube channel, that sort of thing, and I needed something that was a bit more unique. So again, similar to yours, I sort of found, okay, Deep Space Luke. Oh, okay, that's not taken on anything. So that was really what I stuck with ever since.
Yeah, so you mentioned putting numbers after your name. I was going to say, I've still got my numbers after my name. I just started with 66 because I was I don't know, teenager, and I just thought, let's put 66, and I forgot the password, so then I did another 6, and then I started to realise that 666 was a different thing, so I tried to put a 7 in instead. But that was my first registering on an Elite Force forum, so it all came from Elite Force, and I've stuck with the name ever since.
I think it's an inevitability in this day and age, isn't it? Because back in the early 2000s, when we all had 56k modems, it was a lot easier to kind of find yourself a unique username. Whereas these days, I think it doesn't matter what you try and come up with; it'll be like, "Sorry, that's taken. Have you considered such and such 6653594 instead?" It's kind of yeah.
Well, now I really have to look up if the nickname is taken, Master Team Killer.
Yeah, you better lock that one down pretty quick if you want it.
Since we're already on the topic of nicknames and clans, maybe, have you played on any specific clan or home servers? Luke, you mentioned you had your own community. Did you host that by yourself?
I didn't host it. I was a member of it, of Holo Federation. So I didn't really have a clan back in the Holo Match era before RPGX. I sort of just played on whatever server was available. And I remember things like Free For All Friday and something to do with the photo. I'm trying to remember the server names. There were things like Photon Friday and things like that sound familiar, or some variation of that. So I used to play on whatever was running, wherever most players were at the time. So it wasn't really until RPGX 2.0 was a thing that I actually got involved in a clan. And I never had my own clan. I joined others. And Holo Federation was the one led by a username named Kamzine, I think it was. Don't know how you pronounced it. And that was a lot of fun. And the premise behind that was each week in the serial roleplay, we would all be playing our characters as holograms on a futuristic Federation starship, and we would play through the stories on that. And there's a really strong community there. But it wasn't the only one. There were various RPGX communities, and I tried to sort of dip my toe into a couple. I did run my own serial roleplay once or twice, trying to remember the details of those, but it was fun to sort of push the limits of what Elite Force could be, because it was obviously absolutely not designed to be a role-playing game. It was designed to be a first-person shooter, and so to see it adapted and retooled for something completely different was really cool at the time. It's the sort of thing that in some ways is a bit more common now with some games, but at the time it felt really fresh.
Yeah, I was going to say, picking up on the clans bit, I was going to say, I think back in Holo Match, I started off, I think it was a clan, SS13, I think, was a member of playing in there. I can't remember too much about it, aside from being very bad, at the game, which is probably why, getting into role-playing before RPGX came around, when we were just doing it on normal maps. And then, getting involved in helping to having to build out RPGX, getting that going, and then it turned into a lot bigger thing in the community than I think we probably understood or expected at the start.
Oh, for sure.
Can I interject for a second? I'm curious because the RPG aspect of the game only came to the attention of myself pretty late, I think maybe 2008 or something. When did this whole RPG thing start, actually?
There were a couple of versions of it, weren't there? So I'm thinking that 2008, it was quite popular at that point. I don't know if it had really become a game mode, so to speak, until, 2005, 2006? I don't think it was much earlier than that. I might be wrong, but I don't remember it being as big a thing until then.
We first started doing it, helpfully reminded by our website banner saying, since September 2002. So when we first started trying to do the role thing, but yeah, it was a few years after that before it actually started getting mods to make it an actual game mode as opposed to essentially not shooting in a free-for-all.
I mean, just looking at the website at the moment, I think the 1.01 release of RPGX was on the 6th of April 2005. So that was about 20 years ago, actually, which is...
Okay.
And I'm sure you had versions before that, but yeah, it's...
I've never really played the RPGX thing. I was always aware of it. I was curious what's going on, of course, because at the point of 2006 and 2007, there was still a really strong Star Trek community or Star Trek Elite Force community playing the game. I was already being less players, and it was already then getting more concentrated, and I was, of course, curious. But okay, yeah. And you did... Mr. Luke, you did mod RPGX from the start, or did this come about only after someone already started?
I was only a player, so I was kind of someone who was just trying to tell stories and run stories using that mod. But it was like, I found it was really versatile. I felt that like it was definitely, even if it's 20 years old now, it still to me feels like the new version of Elite Force, something that was really, like I said earlier on, quite innovative.
I see. Okay, thanks.
Yeah, I mean, speaking to your point on that, I mean, I'll be perfectly honest with you guys, I'm terrible at first-person shooters. So absolutely loved the single player of Elite Force, but on HoloMatch, like it was, you know, I had fun, and that's the main thing, I suppose, but definitely wasn't any good. Yeah, I think the cool thing about the RPGX mod specifically, which I think it's probably the most popular, or if not one of the most popular mods that we ever had, was just purely, as you're saying, Luke, it just completely changed the way you could interact with people. It wasn't just about deathmatch or capture the flag or, you know, trying to play some kind of competitive game mode. It was like, okay, we can actually get together with our friends and just hang out in like the cool universe of Star Trek, right? And just kind of nerd out, and that's really, really cool. And yeah, just added a completely new dimension to the game, really. Yeah,
I think it's very close to something that a lot of players today are still missing. It's basically a co-op mod for EF. EF2 has a co-op mod, and you can play the campaign together, and it's awesome. And for EF1, this is still missing, and not sure if this will ever come about, but the next best thing will probably be RPGX then.
Actually, someone has started trying to actually create co-op mod. I think it was long before the Quake 3 source was opened. But I think there was someone who was trying to make a co-op mod. It was in 2002, 2003. It's so long ago. I cannot tell you exactly. I'm really sorry, but I'm very sure there was someone who tried. But it was really buggy. It didn't work well. We'd have to dig deeper, but I think it is probably forgotten by the internet by now. But I know there was someone who tried.
I mean, today there are even attempts, or technically it could be done very easily actually, to create a open source variation of the single player. There are people who gave it a shot, but they know from a licensing point of view you better not release that. And so we are stuck with, okay, you have a nice multiplayer based on a open source engine, everything is fine, but for the single player you still have the same issues and problems you had back then.
Well, the single player is another beast. The single player has many scripting languages and stuff that Ravensoft itself coded.
Exactly.
especially for the Quake 3 engine. They did heavy modifications for the single player mode, and this is also the reason why it was always distributed as two exe files. The one file is really, really close to the standard Quake 3 version, and the other one is that where actually all the coders work from Ravensoft went into making the single player game, making this a great experience, albeit a bit short. If I remember correctly, the single player was just about 12, 13 hours if you stuck to the game.
You say that, but on my first playthrough of Elite Force, I actually got stuck on the first level. I was admittedly about 11 years old, okay? But you know that first bit where you reach the blue force field? In that level, right?
Oh.
Okay. Now, bear in mind, this is the first video game I've properly played. So my logic is not thinking as it would do now when it comes to level design. So I was like, okay, I crawl through this little Jeffries tube on the Borg ship, and there's this big power node tower and some explosives on it, which you can shoot to make it fall down, and then the blue force field is released, right? Remember that bit?
Yeah.
So, okay, I thought, barely. Well, I shot at that tower and it exploded, and I thought, okay, that must mean that something down below has opened up that I can now crawl through. So I would then jump down the bottomless pit again and again, trying to land in just the right way so I could then explore to find. At no point did I realise.
Demo?
I don't know if it's in demo. I think it was in the full version that I played this anyway.
Okay.
But it was level 1. It was the rescue, the holodeck simulation at the start of the game.
Yes.
And I didn't think at any point, I'll better go back up to where Beesman is and see if the blue force field switched off. I thought you had to bypass it or something. I spent hours trying to figure out how to get through that level before realizing, I have to go back where I came.
I think you're right. I remember now. I'm pretty sure that what you're describing right now is actually the very first level that was released in the demo. I myself was 14 years old. I was hardcore Trekkie, and Germany we had at that time. In Germany we had the Star Trek Voyager Elite Force was broadcast in German in a dubbed version. Obviously, and obviously always a year behind the US, because it took some time to dub and to buy the rights and whatever. And I was a hardcore diehard Star Trek fan, and when I heard there's going to be an Elite Force game out there, I actually upgraded my computer just to be able to play that one game. And I remember in those times there was this guy who was called Benjamin Börner. He's created and coded the webpage hazardteam.de and has done many updates on the game and he actually had quite close contacts with guys at Ravensoft and was able to get kind of inside information that the big gaming websites would not immediately get and could always update. And now this is coming, and here are those screenshots and those times. You remember you talked about how we had 56K modems in those times, and how images you loaded from screenshots used to load like 5 minutes to load when it was really huge, the image. And he provided a community, had forums where you could talk, and it was quite large. And he played the single player version, and then soon after he lost interest actually for this big website. And this hazardteam.de website was this big go-to website. Everyone in Germany who played Elite Force was looking at this webpage. So Darius, when did you come? I'm curious, when did you come to Elite Force? Did you still know that webpage?
Oh yes, I stalked it all the time. I bought the game directly at release and checked out as soon as I knew English, of course, also Elite Force files. I know all the classic websites.
And obviously, because on our broadcast it used to be SAT1, and I didn't even have cable. It's totally funny. We had just a room antenna, and I live in Stuttgart myself. This is where Porsche and Mercedes comes from. And we have this huge TV tower, and I was just always having to hold this antenna in my hand and directing it straight at the TV tower so that I could get Star Trek Voyager cleanly the image cleanly into and just
Those were the
watch it.
days, yeah.
Those were the days, I guess.
I think it
Okay,
made television feel like more special when you had to almost work for it. It made every episode. I remember when they used to release the VHS tapes, because that was a lot of my first exposure to Voyager and Deep Space Nine and Next Generation. And they would have 2 episodes of Voyager on one cassette. And
I see, yeah.
getting one of those videos with 2 new episodes for me anyway, that was a big deal at the time. So I can totally understand that you had to sort of like hold an antenna in the right place to get the signal, and that was there's something quite cool about that. Now it's obviously all on Netflix.
Yeah, I mean, it was a lot more commitment back then in general.
Yes, it did.
Even if you had a nice little cable TV and everything, you had to make some time. It was like at each afternoon at 1600 hours, there's Voyager on. You had to make the time. Meaning, okay, if you were at school at the time, sucks for you. Today, you can just binge an entire season within a few hours and be happy with that. Back then, you had to wait at least a week for the next episode if it came out.
Exactly.
You were really tuned.
When you missed the episode, then you were kind of screwed because you had to wait. Like maybe you had to. Oh yes. We still used to have those programmable VCR recorders. You remember?
Yeah.
And
the worst was when you missed
program it so that it would like record like at 3 a.m. when you knew there would, or you hoped there was going to be the rerun. You just
you're right.
Oh my god, yes.
And you were really screwed if it was a 2-parter. Then you were really screwed. Like, okay, you can miss one episode, it's fine. But if you miss the first or the second one, doesn't matter.
Well, that happened with me with Star Trek Voyager Equinox Part 2 at the start of Season 6. For the longest time, I had the Part 2 videotape, but I couldn't find in shops or anywhere the first part, the end of Season 5. So I watched Equinox Part 2 about 3 or 4 times before I got to see Equinox Part 1 to know what on earth was going on. So that was kind of fun. I wouldn't want to go back to those times, but there was something special about it where every episode was a big deal. I think you missed that in a way.
You appreciated it a little bit more, I think.
Yeah, definitely.
Ever someone who was born after the year 2000 ever listens into what we're saying right now, they'll probably be really, okay, those are from the Middle Ages. This is awful.
The reason why I think it's important, though, is because I feel like television these days is way more disposable than it used to be. It's a bit like how you used to go to Blockbuster Video, right? And whatever movie you picked from Blockbuster that night, like you were watching that movie, whether it was crap or not, right? Like that's kind of the way it was. But that's how you would discover and kind of get into new things. Like, for example, like, I don't know if you remember this, Luke, but here in the UK, and Star Trek was always a little bit of a like television studios and companies kind of looked down on it a little bit. So like Deep Space Nine would be on at like 6 o'clock in the morning on like Sky One, where like nobody was awake at that time to watch it. So it's kind of like graveyarded it a little bit. And like you'd get Star Trek: The Next Generation on BBC Two, maybe if you were lucky. And then like
this is actually my point. Elite Force was always huge. Absolutely huge in Germany, because Sat1, the broadcaster, would really make a lot of advertisement. They were probably getting good ratings for these series. Was really very popular, and this is also the reason why Star Trek Elite Force was only translated. All the voices. This is crazy. It was translated to German. Just think about it. Okay,
German work.
It's still a market of 80 million people, and the webpage hazardteam.de I was talking about was probably also part of the strategy, because it was one page for German, only dedicated for this one game. And alas, sadly, the founder, Benjamin Börner, he was soon after, he wasn't really much into multiplayer gaming, and then he gave up the webpage. And I think I can't remember all the names, but 1 or 2 site owners later, I was coming into the role of presenting maps, and this webpage was just as part of this work page, I was looking at mods. I was often on FileFront, obviously, because I had to get those files from somewhere and those new maps and those new things. And people would write to me and, hey, look, here's the great map we made, and have a look at this map and review it. And then I was doing this in my free time. I was loading the map into Elite Force, was making screenshots, or loading this one mod, making reviews, and also updating about Elite Force 2 and the newest things coming out in Elite Force 2. I think I did this for quite some time, maybe 3 years. It was lots of work. I still remember this. It was really a lot of work, and with the time, obviously it died down because your life moves on. You don't always stick with the same thing, I think.
I think what was really cool about those days is all the Elite Force websites, like, because there wasn't that many, it was very collaborative. Like, I don't know if you remember, like, we used to affiliate link to each other, and we'd have like the little buttons on the sides of our sidebars and stuff, and everybody was very collaborative.
Sure.
Yeah, which was you don't see that as much these days. I feel like it's like some, modern communities are very sort of isolated now, I feel, and they.
Well, I think it's just the numbers. This is also the first time that I see you and hear you guys and play with you, because obviously the ping problem.
Oh yeah.
That was something to think about, wasn't it?
I can't really play on American servers. I'm sorry.
Yeah.
Not competitively, at least. And so I think Britain was always fine. I think from Germany to Britain is okay, kind of, because speed of light and stuff, speed of light mediums, like, that's okay.
It wasn't
but to America, yes.
You would think in the year 2025 we'd have figured this problem out, but actually I can't play games like Rocket League with American servers. It just doesn't work. But the nice thing about Quake is it's that lightweight by today's standards. It does work quite well if you've got a good internet connection.
I have to make a shout out to ChillaX. He is correcting me because the ping problem isn't an issue anymore. I'm not sure about this. The problem is the speed of light is physically constant. You can't fix it. You can't get faster to America. I'm sorry.
This is not exactly true, but it's more like you have to refresh the signal. It's not like you have one cable in between Europe and the United States, and that's it. And the technique in between the technology is basically your bottleneck. And yes, we tried that. We even tried to create we called it midway station server, as close as it gets to the United States, just one hop over there. And it was still not nice for the Americans. So it's still an ongoing issue, and it's technically not the game that has the problem. It's the infrastructure. Can't help that.
I mean, it's incredible that you can do it at all, really, isn't it? Like,
it's probably more made for throughput. You want to run Netflix, and you can cache like 10 seconds, and that's fine. And it's not made for pro gamers, I guess.
Exactly. You can be happy when we are talking like this right now and it works. It doesn't matter if your package arrives in 20 milliseconds or 80 milliseconds. It's not really important. You won't notice the difference. But in a shooter, of course, that can be all the difference.
I remember when I was working on the Elite Force engine, I was Chillax, thank you for your reminder. He was just messaging me. I was working on some kind of unlagged stuff.
Yes.
I still remember I was trying. He said there was some server-side prediction based on ping. I remember I was playing with it. I never really got to something workable, to be honest, because this is probably something you could write an essay at university about, and I didn't have the time to get through with it, if it's at all possible to get decent gameplay with unlagged. He says it works now. Okay.
It's simple math or physics if you want to. If I turn left and the prediction was right, I'm in trouble, of course. And the bigger the difference is in a time fashion, the more trouble you will have. You can't magically predict everything.
Sure. I think unlagged is the concept that the game server tries to calculate backwards from when the command for firing with the weapon came in to where all the hitboxes were. And it was trying to calculate back and improve your aim. So in your client, it actually looks like you missed at first. And then the server tells the client, no, you didn't miss because I calculated back. the enemy was based on your ping was at this location, so you should have hit him.
Yeah.
Which accounted for weird effects when you were actually playing the game. I remember trying it. I never got it to work myself.
Maybe let's talk about community again. I think this is a general situation. I can see this in Armada, EF, and any other community. As you observed, back then it was more like an open exchange. People were far more likely to collaborate in some fashion. And today, what strikes me as a huge problem is that we actually reverted. Back then, you had some forums, some websites, and it was all public. There was Hazard Team. There is a page, everybody can Google it. You will find it. I found it, and I had no internet connection. I did that at school, but I knew of it. I found it, and today you have things that are at first very nice, like Discord. We can talk with one another, but then you have a EF Discord, which is essentially some sort of black box. If you don't have a Discord account, you will not have a means to peek into that. If you don't know the link to that server, you don't even know that it exists, basically. And I think in that regard, we actually reverted. Maybe there are communities that you don't even know about, but Googling is not necessarily cutting it. Because if I don't make, again, a web page that says, okay, there is a EF Discord, how would I find out?
It's a huge problem. I think the key reason why this is a problem is because of just the nature of the internet has changed in the last 25 years. When we started, Files Network as it was back then, there was no such thing as social media or Discord, and we had IRC and things like that. But effectively, the internet was an open platform where anybody could create anything and be equally discovered. Search engines were definitely not as weighted as they are now. These days, the internet is 5 apps on your phone. It's Facebook, it's Reddit, it's TikTok, it's YouTube, and it's Discord or whatever, right? That's the internet now. And if you're not present in those places, it's very difficult to be discovered. And even when you are present in those places, it's very difficult to be seen because everything is now algorithmically driven. And, the algorithm's not serving up 25-year-old first-person shooters for Star Trek fans. Yeah. It's just not what it does. So it's a huge problem. And I wish I had a good answer for it. I do lament the fact that forums died and concentrated on Reddit.
Yeah,
because
this is absolutely an issue. I was talking to my wife about this, actually, because she she posted on lots of different forums back in the day, as you would say. And I do think the death of forums and specialist places easily discoverable on the internet, that you could go and share your fandom for something or share mods and maps and user-generated content, in this case for Elite Force. The sort of death of that has really sort of homogenized everything and made everything feel like if it's not trending, if it isn't appealing to the algorithm, then it's not going to get noticed and it's hard to find. And Star Trek's already a niche, really, even now, still. So a Star Trek video game is going to be even more of a niche to find anything on. And I did feel that it was much easier, 15, 20 years ago to just Google, in my case, Elite Force, and find every resource of those. There's a few websites out there, the ones that we've talked about, and that was much more easy to find than the things that are just promoted and spat at you now on social media.
Yeah, this is exactly my experience back then. As I said, I had to do these things at school. I got my first internet connection at home in early summer 2006, so I missed most of the party EF-wise. But when you went online in school in 2003, you could just Google it. You would find some download pages for mods, maps, whatever. I still remember when I got my home internet connection, I went on a download rampage. I grabbed every map that I could get my hands on, because you don't know when the next time would be that the internet is failing. But you could do this all yourself. You just had basically to Google it, and you could find it. And there were loads of sites actually that maybe not necessarily had EF as their main topic, but among other topics, as a topic. And some of them are still around, only a few, but these dinosaurs, so to say, are just what remains. Back then it was really a lot, and people, you really could feel people cared about this game, but trying to not just consume it, but also to contribute to it. this is also something that I find is today a little bit difficult to be able to interact with the game, not just with people, but let's say I want to mod this game. I want to create skins, let's say.
You said you just came to the party in 2006, right?
Yeah, I think in 2003 it was high time, and in 2006, as you noticed, it was already a little bit decline.
How old is everybody here? Actually, I myself, I'm 40. I've turned 40. How old is everybody else? I'm just curious. How old were you?
I'm not far behind you. Let's put it that way.
Yeah,
34. So for me, it was like
practically a baby.
yeah, realistically. Yeah, by the Elite Four
Yeah.
standards of the community, I am a baby.
34. And when did you start playing Elite Force? In 2007 or something,
2001.
right?
Because what happened with me, my sort of like first exposure to Elite Force was that I had a subscription to the United Kingdom Star Trek monthly magazine, and they were advertising it in there in 2000. Massive Trekker, take your pick. I don't mind either. And there was a competition being run for a copy, because it was newly released, a copy of Elite Force and a copy of Starfleet Command 2. And I entered that competition on a lark.
That was 1999.
Well, they were packaged together. Maybe it was they had copies of it left over or something. Either way.
You must have been 6 or 7, right?
Well, in 99 I was 8, going on 9. So, but no, it was definitely sort of around 2001, I think, that I got my copy, and I got a collector's edition because that's what they were putting up in the competition, and so I got that. And for the first few months, I couldn't play it because I didn't have a PC that could run it properly, and I would sometimes take it over my friends' houses, and their PCs wouldn't have DirectX installed or something like that would prevent me from playing. So eventually my parents and I did get a family computer, a PC, which could run Elite Force. It was really good at the time, and that's when I started playing it, and that's when I got stuck on the first level. Let's not talk about that. I got past that eventually, and so that was like my first exposure to it. And like I said before, that was my first real gateway into video gaming. And I also remember that, much like some of you guys, at home our internet connection was a dial-up, which means to download even a 15 megabyte mod or map or skin would take over an hour, and sometimes
it was not
half
just
a day.
grab a coffee. It was more like bake yourself a cake.
Can I tell you something
Pretty much.
incredible? You may tell me if you remember this. We used to offer a service on EF Files and all the other file websites where you could add the mods to a CD, and we would burn them to a CD, and we would post them out to you because
I do remember this.
Yeah, we had a burn a CD service because it was physically quicker for us to burn a disc, put it in the post, and send it to you than it would be for you to download it on your 56k modem. That's how.
I remember that I would try and, just for a laugh, try and download a 500 megabyte something. I don't know if it was a mod, probably was a big mod. And it would say, download complete in 17 years, 8 months, something ridiculous like that.
Yeah.
And so absolutely it was a lot quicker to do. I do remember that service. I don't think I ever used it myself, mostly because when I would go to school, secondary school, they had broadband. They didn't have dial-up.
Yes.
And so I would just, and I was friendly with the ICT teacher, so he would let me use the computers to download mods and things like that. And that was a lot of fun. And that meant that when I sort of brought home my own freshly burnt CD from school full of maps and mods, I appreciated it all the more. A bit like we were talking about earlier with television, I appreciated being able to install all these things and explore all these things really quickly. Obviously, eventually we got broadband and the internet evolved, and it was pretty easy to download maps and mods because these were quite small files, really.
It's really crazy. People wouldn't believe that, but I have the proof next to me in the shelf. Even Wikipedia you could get as a CD.
Yep.
Oh, yeah. Yeah.
If you tell this to someone who hasn't been there, they would call you crazy. And yeah, I can totally understand this, because for me it was at school, but next problem is then how do you get that stuff home? On discs? On floppy disks? If you have someone burning a CD for that's cool. Awesome.
I myself was lucky in this regard, because I think at the end of 1999, we signed up to the first 50,000 or something like that households in Germany who would get DSL from Telekom, from Deutsche Telekom, and it was felt like speed. It was 768 kilobit per second at first, and I think 128 kilobit per second upstream. It was lightning fast. I still remember Napster, the green bars, and Napster going like.
How could
zooming.
you know that?
And before that, we had ISDN. This is German digital standard for internet. It was just 64 kilobit per second, but pretty reliable actually, because voice modems.
And if you were real dick, you were combining two channels, so nobody could call anymore.
Right. It cost double the price, and we never did it. So whatever. I'm still curious about Simo. Where are you actually from, and how old are you? Because I still see your names in the list.
Well, so I'm from the UK as well, and I'm 38 now. I was going to say I had to think how old I was, but yeah, 38 now. So in the
we're
middle.
at that point now. We have to think about it, aren't we? Yeah, I get it.
No, you don't want to think about it, which is probably why.
Yeah, that's more accurate actually. Yes,
Indeed.
I think it's not a coincidence, because we're not too far apart with our ages. And Deep Space Luke, can I ask you?
Yeah. I'm 34, so like.
Sorry, I meant Sidaris. Sorry.
Not a problem. Yeah, I'm outing myself. I was 13 when the game was released, and I played it first on a 56 kilobit modem. It was very interesting to not only download but play the game. It was a totally different world.
Did you then go on to multiplayer, to HoloMatch, and how was all your guys' stories? I myself, I know I was playing just the single player campaign. I probably played like 2-3 times. Then I thought, well, let's just try out the multiplayer, the HoloMatch thing, and turned out it was actually quite fun to play. There were many players back in those days, many servers there. So I know from you, Luke, you didn't right off the bat start with multiplayer, right? But
not exactly. No, I really like playing the story mode, especially once I got past that first level. I shot through that game pretty quickly, and it isn't a long game. But what I love about it is it feels like it's trying to do something different with every mission, even though it is basically just a quite simple first-person shooter. There's a stealth mission in it. There's a sort of like a gauntlet mission of just constant enemies. It really tries to play different styles within that single player campaign. So I always felt like, whichever level I loaded up, I was going to get something different from the next level, I guess, is what I'm trying to say. So I really enjoyed that story, and I like the characters. I really, really like the characters of Alex Monroe, Telsia Murphy, the Hazard team. I thought that was really fresh, and I enjoyed sort of like the little cameos you'd see in the series when I think Juliette Girotte turns up very briefly in the background of one episode because she's Betazoid and she has to hide in the transporter from
I watched that
aliens, the Devore, right?
Wait, really? This was in live action Star Trek? I don't remember.
Yeah, this person was an actress in the background. You couldn't really see her, but she was the character of Juliette Girotte from Elite Force. And I thought that was kind of neat that they were able to take elements and slide them in.
I think they threw Chell in a few times as well. I'm sure he popped up from time to time.
Yeah, well, they got the voice actor to be the actor who played Chell in the series. Yeah.
Thanks for telling me. I never picked up on that.
Yeah. And I mean, fun fact, we had one of the guys from the original development team in a interview, and he talked with people, and apparently the story of the game, some of the actors did obviously do some voice acting in there.
Yes, there was voice acting, even from the German dubbing from the German version.
Even those were the original guys.
Yes, they were getting all.
So it was the same voice actors in the game as it was for the German dub.
Yes.
That's great. That's pretty cool.
And I think it was Bertram, the actor of Chakotay, and who said, okay, he really liked the writing. It was good in his opinion. And I would have loved to see more integration, but in any case, I think that they were handed the script to basically approve of it, because you can't just make up a game with a bullshit story and go ahead with that. So they had to have a look at it first, and it was okay for them, and it shows that the story was relatively well written for a computer game. Let's be honest, there are a lot of games out there which have not half as good of a story.
It's incredibly well written. I think it's important as well to remember where Elite Force sits in the history of like video games and the first-person shooter genre, because if you look back, it was only a couple of years earlier that Half-Life had been released. And only a couple of years before that, before like Quake and Doom and those games had kind of invented the genre to begin with, and Wolfenstein and stuff like that, right? So this is like a really fresh genre. And if you look back at the history, and you look back at the history of Star Trek games as well. For Star Trek to be doing a game like this, which was incredibly well voice acted, incredibly well written, sort of doing this really cool immersive, you never leave that first person view really. I mean, it does have cutscenes and things, but it's. For that time, it was really impressive. Not many games were doing that, and for Star Trek to be doing that was really, really cool.
And particularly a shooter. There were people who were questioning the wisdom of, does Star Trek really warrant a shooter genre game? Is this really something that can go along well with Star Trek? And even in that regard, I wouldn't say they nailed it, but really close to perfect, I'd say.
Well, to be honest, I can't see Dawson's Creek as first-person shooter game. Sorry.
This is exactly what I was going to say. Like, I think that Star Trek had always had difficulty translating to the video game format. You had really good games like the Starfleet Command games, which took that naval combat aspect and really pushed that as the format. But a first-person shooter, a Star Trek first-person shooter, at the time, I agree. I think a lot of people didn't necessarily think that would be as successful as it absolutely ended up being. And to this day, it is often at the top of best Star Trek game lists when it comes to magazines and websites doing polls. It regularly is the best. And it's because of the writing and the story and the voice acting. It feels very immersive, and
don't forget the actual Starfleet content in there. I guess everyone who played this game at first was like, "Wow, the consoles! Look at the consoles! Look at the! I got the phaser in my hand."
To be honest, this was the wet dream of every teenie. He was absolutely.
I got to walk around Voyager's corridors. Do not underestimate how big a deal that was at the time.
Yes.
Like getting to explore the bridge and engineering, and that was a huge deal.
Still remember the demo. I was just so blown away. You can just walk around and so great and blah blah blah.
And then the expansion where you could actually walk on Voyager again freely, no mission around you, just walk around it.
You're much too far in the future. I'm still with the demo before they released one single level. More than this one single level. I was talking about this demo, and I was looking up all those hacks. How do you open the console? How do you type in set no clip or no clip? And I was expecting to surely when I put in no clip, I can now move freely. I was thinking now you can surely go outside and explore all of Voyager just with no clip, and you can't imagine my disappointment.
They didn't model the ship.
They only modeled those things.
I remember this.
I was kind of a bit disappointed, but not for too long. I was thinking, I guess that makes sense. They're probably not going to have all of Voyager in there when I just do no clip.
And it was educational. I mean, today, how many times do you have the means to experience this fallacy? Like, of course they didn't model the entire ship. It makes sense. But from a technological point of view, it was also surprising. When I go at the other side of the wall, the wall is invisible, it's transparent, I can see everything. And if you are more of a technical guy, then you begin to understand stuff. You realize things, and just tiny things like I can walk around on this map however I want, and you already learn something from it. I think this also gets lost today because everything is hidden away. Don't get into contact with technology.
So my big dream was actually that Elite Force would enable you to walk every deck, every room, to explore every tiny bit of thing. And of course, that's not how real life works. This is a dream of some 14-year-old guy who doesn't really yet know how the world works. It doesn't even work like this in the movie. That they would just have to pan the camera like...
Where's the photon launcher? Where is it?
And you'd see all the crew standing behind the scenes, and actor cue cards folding up and whatever. So of course it's just a dream.
I think it's a credit. I think it's a compliment to the game designers that you don't really feel that when you're first playing it.
Yeah.
You do feel immersed, even though it is limited. Even in the virtual Voyager, which expands it hugely and was absolutely a fantastic expansion pack, even then you feel immersed and you don't really question it. You might not be able to walk through every door or visit every room on Voyager, but you never feel like you're restricted. You do really get that sense that you're a crew member on Voyager in the middle of an episode. It feels like you're in the middle of the episode. The writing is that good, and you are able to have some agency in what you're doing, even though it obviously is just a walkthrough. And you know, so it's a credit to the game designers that it feels that real still.
I do want to say a couple of things on that, because one thing I don't think Star Trek Elite Force and even the sequel Elite Force 2 gets enough credit for, the way it did push the boundaries in the genre of first-person shooters as well. The idea of an expansion pack that didn't really feature any combat at all. It was just entirely exploration and narrative driven, and you know, you go and explore and find things for yourself in a non-linear order, and it had cool little side quests to do, like the holodecks and stuff as well, but like nobody had done that really to that point. First person shooters were very linear, and they were very much about shooting. And when you look at more modern first person shooters, they do have that exploration element to them, you know. And Elite Force 2 as well, like one thing that I thought was really cool in that game, like the mini games and stuff. So like when they had like the tricorders sort of putting the pipes together, and you see that in BioShock like 5 years later. Nobody gives Elite Force credit for like inventing that kind of gameplay mechanic, which just didn't exist at the time. And also the other thing I wanted to say as well is speaking about the technical aspect of it and the way it was really accessible, and the fact that they actually in those days released, you know, modding tools and mapping tools, and so you had like GTK Radiant and stuff like that, so you could actually go in and learn. And actually it's very hard to do that these days because most games are not custom engine, they're either Unreal or Unity, and that's kind of what you learn. But I give that full credit for the reason I have the career I have today. It's purely because of Star Trek Voyager Elite Force. If I didn't learn everything I learned with that game, I wouldn't be doing what I do now, right? Like I wouldn't be working with game studios helping them do this kind of stuff, because it's so educational. And I really hope that young people are still kind of finding their way into learning how video games are made and doing that kind of thing where you just play around, no clip, swap some textures around, see what happens. Like that's how you learn. It's really cool. So yeah, I owe so much.
In the modern age, I think in the modern age, children today and young adults, they're playing games like Fortnite, and even games like that, despite the fact that they are, they're battle royales, they're a completely different breed to first-person shooters like Elite Force. At least games like that, they still have modes where you can create your own maps and create your own levels. And so I think, although it's a much less technical way of learning about how games are made, it's still giving younger people a chance to create within these games. And I think that, not every game has to be Minecraft, but I do think that it still can be a gateway for people to learn about the video game industry.
Yeah,
Also,
one of the things I always look back at when I was at my interview for my first job. I'll say first job that I'm still at, is talking about in my interview, things that I'd done developing the graphics, helping build stuff for Elite Force, helping to run the group, and it feels odd. I was talking in an interview about playing this game and getting involved in all this stuff, but it was actually really useful, really really helpful life skills essentially for just learning, being curious, trying stuff out. Which, because I'm doing software development stuff, it's like that's.
Would you please tell me again? Can you please tell me again what you did for Elite Force? I know you.
So it was, I guess, as well as being one of the admins for the Elite role playing group, was I was doing a lot of texture work, so Photoshop and stuff like that, to be developing the LCARs, the computer interfaces, the graphics.
So you were doing
and stuff.
You were more content creator side. Did you also code on the engine or on the game files themselves?
Not in the engine. I guess it got as far as shaders and that sort of stuff. But yeah, worked the map.
Okay, so Saturn, did I understand you correctly? You coded on the engine, right?
I never really got my hands dirty. Sometimes I think about it, fixing certain aspects about it, but I never really did.
Because I think this is a really important point for what you're trying to say today. You were speaking about the Unity engine, you were speaking about Minecraft, and I think in this regard, Quake 3 is also, the engine itself is also a bit of a liability in this respect. Because I think it's not easy to make maps with GTK Radiant. To be honest, I've never done it for other games. I just know I tried to do a few simple maps myself, and there's really, really a lot of learning you have to learn. You have to know exactly. First you need to have brushes. Yes, everything is brush. The brush is actually just a cube, and then you say this cube goes from here to there. And building a world like this is really tedious. It's really time consuming. You need to place many, many blocks, many brushes. It's really hard to actually do. It's enormous what you have to do as a mapper. And I think modern technologies are probably not that difficult anymore to create content for.
It's all done front of house now. Like if the aforementioned Fortnite, all of it is done in game. You don't have to go out and use a third-party program to create anything. So there is that loss of like the technical side of things. You don't get to see that so much because it's done in game. But I found the Elite Force 1 Radiant, that was a tricky one to use. I never made maps for Elite Force 1. I made a few maps and mods for Elite Force 2 with Uber Radiant, and I had a bit of fun with that, and I got to be okay at that. I was never brilliant at it, but I found that a little easier to use. But it definitely was an education in a way that a lot of these games aren't now. A lot of modern games, if you are going to have a creative input to it, if there's user-generated content, that's usually done in-game, which I still think is great, and I still think it's important that people get to create mods and create maps and their own levels. I think that's important for the longevity of a game, if nothing else.
Yeah,
but it's not done so much on the technical level. You don't get to see the same interfaces and third-party applications as you did with Elite Force.
I mean, you look at something like Roblox, which is just, it's teaching a lot of kids some really useful skills around, game design and even how to make money in an industry. But it's definitely not the same skill set,
Indeed.
Creating content in that game. And I do worry that a combination of in-game creation tools like that, combined with, the rise of AI where, I can just type a prompt in now to tell me how to make the thing rather than doing it myself. Whether it's just a skill that, I don't know. I'm too old to know what the kids are doing these days, but I worry it's a skill that is slowly being lost to time. Because, GTK Radiant was an absolute nightmare to make a map in. But once I figured it out and I made my first map, and it was a terrible map, by the way, the satisfaction I felt of having learned to do that was so incredible. And then, you just hone those skills. And by the time I made my last map, it was still terrible, but less so. And then, sharing that with the world, right? And having that sort of gratification of being able to say, hey, look at this thing I made. And I actually put some time and dedication and skill into that creation is, I feel there's less of that these days.
And fun fact, I mean, I don't know if you have watched this anniversary video for Half-Life. They were also describing how the team came to be, and it's very similar. There were people that were already modding, they were already creating content, and what they did is they pulled a few of these people into their team creating this game. Personally, I'm pretty sure someone who got their hands dirty themselves, fell on their noses, found out things the hard way, but kept going, were motivated, and created stuff are probably a lot more into whatever it is they're doing and producing more interesting results in the long run, because it's not just a job for them that they get paid and that's about it. Personally, I think they have an intrinsic motivation and their results will always be a little bit more than just, okay, this is a 9-to-5 job. I created a map. I don't give a shit. Not my problem if it is shitty. I don't think this... Yeah.
This origin story sounds very American. I think that could only have happened in America, right? Never in Germany.
Not necessarily. Yeah. I mean, I'm also I'm also in the tech industry, but I didn't learn it nominally. I got 2 information sciences courses essentially 2 semesters and not an entire studies course. And I'm in this industry because, I was interested in this stuff. I got my hands dirty, I fell on the nose, and so on and so on. And I think if you're really that motivated, there's no one holding your hand doing the job. You do it yourself and you stick with it. I think this is a different type of person doing it, and you need these people. And it is also in Germany possible. I'm the living proof of that. I have nominally never learned what I'm doing right now for a living.
I wasn't referring to you personally having a career like this. I was talking about a game being developed like this in Germany. I don't think you would have...
If it is a German development team, you would have a hard time convincing them, I'm the guy you want to have.
And
I know what you mean. You always have to have the piece of paper that says he can do it.
And in America, they were just saying, hey, I saw your stuff on this forum, like this and this, such and such, and you're so great. I think Half-Life was based on Quake 2 engine. I still remember actually playing Quake 2 at the time. Yes, and this was already also an engine that probably had very similar concepts to how Quake 3 worked, and they had a big modder fan base who was doing stuff for Quake 2, so it makes absolute sense that they would recruit for Half-Life from this enormous pool of potential that you can just tap into.
Yeah, but you're right. In Germany, we are a little bit more coward, so to say. I always think, give the guy a chance. If you see he's working shitty, okay, you can always fire him within the first half of a year. You have this trial period where you can do that. If it is really not working, get rid of him again. But why not give him a chance? This is where we are really bad.
Is it true that we are pretty evenly split between 3 people from Germany, 3 from the UK? Is it like this right now?
I think so.
So, isn't it? Yeah.
Kind of. I'm a little bit under you. I'm in Austria.
Almost the same.
No,
but I think that's interesting, though, because I think that speaks to the demographics of the audience that played the game, right?
Yeah.
Because I think the biggest, well, obviously the US, but outside of the US, it really was like UK, Germany, like you say, that were like the biggest audiences for this game.
And not just the game, the shows. I think a big part of it really is that in Germany there is a huge market, or at least used to be a huge market for Star Trek itself. As the captain says, the show was in normal time slots, not in the morning at 5 a.m. or something. And there's something that says something about the audience in Germany. It goes for the games as well.
Fame for us, it was a huge deal in the UK. Star Trek's a big deal in the UK. Not to the extent perhaps that it was in Germany, though, because like we were saying earlier on, it was always broadcast at inconsistent times. And I think there was always a big fan base for it, but that wasn't really reflected in how it was broadcast. Whenever I was online, it always seemed to me like Germany was a real big fan base for Star Trek, and especially Voyager.
What's the current state of Elite Force? Are there still any American players or people who still play this game who are in these communities here on Discord? Are there any guys you can think of that you know of?
Yeah. Roughly, when you look at it, it's to my knowledge, to my guess, roughly 50-50 Europe and the United States. Barely anything outside, and within Europe, we are really reflecting the situation. It's mostly Germans and Brits,
Well, it's a shame that we don't have any American here, isn't it? If that's the case, I think. Okay.
They're all having breakfast right now.
Oh, yeah, that's true.
Oh, yeah, sure. That's
true.
I do wonder if
not quite. It's late here. I think it must be the noon there.
Digesting their lunch,
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, it's interesting. I do wonder if there's a cultural aspect to it as well, because I have spent a lot of time in Germany in recent years for shows and things. I do find that our cultures are more similar than I came to sort of realize. Like, I think of the German culture and British culture, we like a lot of the same things. And I wonder whether Star Trek is part of that, because, obviously Star Trek is popular all around the world. But I think when you look at even with things like conventions, like the 3 biggest spots on the convention circuit is obviously like Las Vegas and the US. But then it's London, and it's usually Germany as well. Like those usually like the 3 spots where like the biggest conventions happen for Star Trek.
FedCon, don't you? That's the big one in Germany. Am I right? FedCon?
Exactly, at FedCon, yes.
Yeah, and then we had the Destination Star Trek conventions for a little while in the 2010s. That's now gone to be sort of non-licensed, more of a fan event. And then Las Vegas was the really big US one, and they've done a couple of other ones in the US, but I can't think of many other Star Trek conventions, specifically Star Trek conventions, elsewhere in the world. Usually it's more of a general Comic-Con.
Yeah, it's rolled into like a Comic-Con or something outside of it. But I mean, I guess we don't have the numbers, but it does feel like that. Yeah, Germany and the UK and the US seem to be like the markets for Star Trek, right?
I mean, there's a reason why they were really dubbing multiple games. It wasn't just EF, for example. It was also Armada 2, EF2. Getting your own dubbing means they had to invest money, obviously, and you don't do this if you don't have a market of that. And for me, as a juvenile, it was great because obviously I wasn't speaking English and I could enjoy the game just fine. And that also helps essentially getting you into the game. I still remember I was having Half-Life Blue Shift at first only in English, and it wasn't as attractive, obviously. If you really have difficulties following what is unfolding before you don't understand stuff, it's a blocker. And in EF, you just could play it up and down, as was said, with the very same voice actors, and all of a sudden you're on the ship.
Our accents might be better now if it would have been English from the start.
Yeah, obviously. On the other hand, it didn't really do any harm learning English, obviously. But as a 13 or 14-year-old, you're already struggling at school with that stuff. It's new for you. It's a challenge. And in the game, you don't have this obstacle, and you can enjoy and immerse yourself in it as if it were nothing. And yeah, this is something I loved about EF right from the start, that you can be in the situation with no hassle.
Yeah, I mean, it's incredibly important for accessibility as well, isn't it? Because, I mean, these days, like every video game that's released will try and target, at a minimum, what we call EFIX, which is English, French, Italian, German, and Spanish. Because if you can have your game natively in those languages, they will sell better and they will be more popular, right? Like it's absolutely, and I think that's probably part of, probably is the reason why Elite Force was so successful in Germany, because you had that native language release, which is really, really cool. I know we're here to talk about Star Trek Elite Force as well, but as you were just talking about some of the other Star Trek games, I'm just curious what other games you guys played, because I feel like we were in a little bit of a golden age of Star Trek video games in like the early 2000s that because we had Star Trek Bridge Commander, we had Star Trek Armada and Armada 2, we had Starfleet Command, we had Elite Force, even some of the slightly rubbisher ones like Hidden Evil I kind of liked as well. Like we had so many.
It had a good story. It wasn't the best technically, and
gameplay was trash, but the story was
janky. It had good voice acting.
Yeah.
I played a lot of Star Trek Armada. I recently played Star Trek Armada 1 for the first time in quite a few years again, and I had a really good time with it. It's obviously fairly simplistic as real-time strategy games go, but having the voice actors, having the chance to build your fleets and all the things you see on the television screen, but in front of you under your command, is always fun. That never gets old. And so I really enjoyed playing that again. That was great fun. I think it's got a good story too. A lot of these Activision era Star Trek games had good stories. Elite Force absolutely does. Armada 1 absolutely does. Bridge Commander, written by DC Fontana, right?
Absolutely, yes.
Yeah, so they were some fantastic games. Not all of them were as good as some. I mean, Away Team was another game that I thought was good, but perhaps could have been pushed a bit better.
Has anyone of you played Starfleet Academy?
Oh yes, and the sequel, Klingon Academy, best game, best story in a game ever.
This I still remember playing this. I think it must have been before Elite Force. I'm not sure, but
it was. Yeah,
it was before Elite Force. I remember it was on 6 CDs that you had to change as you were progressing on your levels, and the game was actually part space shooter where you would, with your keyboard and your mouse, could shoot at other vessels from Star Trek. And you could shoot up Miranda-class vessels, you could shoot up the Enterprise Constitution class, you could shoot Klingon vessels, you could shoot the Romulans. And the other half of the game was driven by cutscenes. And really acted cutscenes with real actors in those uniforms from Nicholas Meyer from the Star Trek II time era, as they were introduced with Nicholas Meyer's Star Trek II: The Wrath of Khan, and I think it was also playing around that time. If I don't have too much memory of this story because it's also must have been soon going to be 30 years ago. When, but that was really I really quite liked the game.
I never managed to play that one, but I have always heard really positive things about it. And its kind of sequel, Klingon Academy, I've played that, and that was really good fun. A lot of the same concepts and live action cutscenes with General Chang and Chancellor Gorkon. And
that was awesome.
but the writing was great. And that was sort of more the Interplay era, the Starfleet Command 2 era.
But it was Interplay, wasn't it? Yes.
Yeah, of the Star Trek games. But when we hit Activision, that was a real renaissance, I thought.
Yes, but get your hand on Starfleet Academy, because I can't recommend it enough. Going back to those old games, they may not look too well these days on a full HD screen or UHD screen. Yes, that may all be, but it's the story that counts, and I cannot highly recommend it enough.
But I think this goes for a lot of Star Trek games, actually, be that Armada or be that Elite Force. Of course, the models are a little bit low polygon in comparison to modern releases, but still a lot of it holds up. I mean, the faces in the EF1 were always shitty. Let's be honest here. If you look at the face of Janeway, it's like, really, guys? She could have had a little less corners, but in general, it still looks relatively good for a title of 25 years.
It does. And I don't think that the quality visually really matters so much if the writing's good and the characters are good and the stories are good.
And the gameplay,
And the gameplay, and it's timeless gameplay. Okay, so perhaps it's not as it doesn't feel as fresh as something like the Destiny series, maybe, but it is still a really reliable first-person shooter. Hollow Match is still really good fun, and it's very easy to pick up. It's got quite a short learning curve.
Well, Hollow Match is kind of similar to Quake 3, actually. It's very similar, just with
it's almost the same.
Weapon. But the gameplay is almost one-to-one the same.
Yeah, I mean, if you played both, you will find that Quake is a little bit faster, but from an optical point of view, actually, I find EF more appealing. If you look at the maps, if you look at the textures, I think it's easier to digest.
I just want to say, actually, I didn't know until today that the reason why Hollow Match was a separate executable was because it was just a completely different version of the Quake 3 engine that was closer to the original. That's actually really cool. But I think it's really interesting how far they pushed that engine, specifically with the single player. And actually, it was really impressive what Ritual did. As no, it's not as popular as Elite Force 1, but the sort of the boundaries they pushed with Elite Force 2 in terms of the way they got character modeling and animation and motion capture in that game and things like that. Like it was really interesting, like just how far the engine could be pushed.
I mean, they added an entire scripting concept on top of it just to have these cutscenes where actually the camera was also moving.
Well, Ravensoft had this kind of stuff too. They had their own scripting language. Everyone had.
Exactly.
Actually, historically, when Elite Force came out, I think they were developing on the Quake 3 engine even before Quake 3, the game itself, was released. I'm pretty sure they must have worked closely together with ID Software. They were getting free releases for the engine and for all the tool chaining kit. There's no other way this could have been so closely released in 1999, because I think Quake 3 came out in 1999. Elite Force also, didn't it? I'm ashamed to say, what was again the exact date that Elite Force was released?
It was September 2000.
September 2000. Okay, I'm sorry.
Yeah.
But 1 year is not enough to make a game of content.
This is actually something a developer member of the development team also said. Okay, they got an earlier version of the Quake engine because they needed to start at some point with the product, and they needed something to work with. And you're totally right.
And the Elite Force single player campaign actually is also, I guess I haven't looked too much at the source code. I also wasn't trying to do too much with single player assets of Elite Force when I make my ioQuake 3 port. But my guesstimate would be that they did add their own scripting. For sure, they must have added their own scripting, some triggers. You would place some red-looking transparent boxes in Quake 3 Radiant, and then when the player walks through, they would trigger some scripted sequence that would execute in the game. Everyone who was developing on the Quake 3 engine would have this kind of type of stuff they would be doing with the engine. And Ritual, they also had obviously access to the source code of Quake 3 long before it was released in 2005, if I remember, or 2006, around this time. Maybe they didn't go to Ravenssoft, they did go to ID Software, so they probably would have had to do all the scripting and all the stuff themselves a second time with their own scripting language. And when you said you found that interesting, well, that the HoloMatch binary, the executable for HoloMatch, is separate because of I guess they were focusing all the energy on the single player campaign, and for HoloMatch they were just kind of that's a bit evil, but they were pretty much retexturing it and bringing all the Star Trek-y stuff in there. There must have been a lot of work also on the HoloMatch thing, but it served them well because they got for free from Quake 3 this balanced gameplay that was really fun to play. So you could play in clans, you could play Capture the Flag, you could play Disintegration, and all those mods, and that were super fun to play. And I think because Elite Force was so popular with so many HoloMatch players, was also the trigger for those guys to think, let's do the expansion pack. It was frankly a bit disappointing.
Oh, really?
Well, if I remember,
I liked Virtual Voyager very much, and they got Jerry Ryan to voice 7 of 9 at long last too.
I thought about the expansion pack. It was, maybe I remember incorrectly. I think the story, the additional missions that you were able to do with them, I felt they were a bit too short.
I think it was ahead of its time, though. Like I was saying earlier, I think the reason why I do recall at the time some people didn't find it that exciting for what it was, but I think it was trying to do something that first-person shooters at the time just weren't doing. There was very little combat. There was very little actual shooting in the expansion pack. It was actually just exploration and discovery and unlocking things.
Well, let's not forget the Captain Proton mission.
Apart from the holodeck stuff, and absolutely, that was incredible as well. But you had to go and discover that. Like it wasn't a linear part of the gameplay. Like you had to go and unlock it. You had to go and unlock the computer core, if I recall.
Yes.
And then you could have access to the holodeck, and you could play Captain Proton, right? And other things. But so there was a lot of content in there, but you kind of had to go and discover it yourself. And I think, at the time, that was rare in first-person shooters. They were very linear, and they would just tell you where to go next. So, I think in hindsight, I think it was impressive.
You're probably right. We were probably spoiled by the first game and were expecting to have another level on this, but they were.
I also think that the expansion was also, for the multiplayer, a big part. I know most of the content were patched into the main game later, but we had assimilation, disintegration, we had many community maps included, some of them even hidden on the disk. It wasn't installed by default.
No.
Yeah, I remember that.
That's
what I was going to say. Like the HoloMatch aspect of the expansion pack was really big too. There was a lot on there, you say, you had to actually install it yourself, some of it.
And also there is a hidden wiki, more or less, or a hidden database on the disk of the expansion itself. It basically tells you the awards, the characters. It's just basically an HTML file, and you click yourself through the database. It was interesting, but it's totally hidden.
And
I really should definitely unpack my CD wherever it's stored.
The other thing about Virtual Voyager was you got to go on a lot of the characters' personal logs and ship logs, and the database in the Astrometrics lab, and the medical database in sickbay, and the hazard team logs. There was a lot of lore in that Virtual Voyager expansion. And again, you had to seek it out. You had to read it all yourself. Neelix had a cookbook, not the physical cookbook that you could buy, but there was actual recipes on the computer in the mess hall that you could go and look at. And that was, again, really immersive. And they didn't have to do that. They didn't have to go to that effort to make Voyager feel real the way they did. We would have been very happy just to walk around the corridors. But by doing that, they really, I think, created something really special and memorable for me, at least, with that.
Absolutely. Incredible world building. And like I say, the first game I can think of that started to do that outside of Elite Force was, you look at something like BioShock again, I come back to that as the example, but you had to explore and find the audio tapes and then get the backstory through those. And that's what Virtual Voyager did. Like, you had to go and explore the content yourself. And I honestly think it was ahead of its time. I really do. I was really impressed with it.
Borg Slayer mission in the if you beamed down to Deck 15, which looked like the Deck 15 from Voyager, from that one episode of Voyager where they go to the bottom of the ship, and that lonely guy was there.
Was that like there was like a game, wasn't there? Yeah,
there was like a top-down third-person shooter where you'd have to like run around this maze and shoot Borg and save 7 of 9, and that was completely different to anything else that Elite Force had shown us. And they didn't have to go to that effort. And that was I don't know why they did that, but I'm really glad they did. And again, it's just showing how much they're pushing the engine. They're pushing what Elite Force can be. And I thought that was really cool. It was short and it was simple and it wasn't too much, but it was cool that they went to that effort. I liked that.
My point being that they didn't actually go so far beyond the first Quake 3 engine release as I made, because after Elite Force came out, there were still many years where the Quake 3 engine was still going strong. For example, Medal of Honor, I believe, used the Quake 3 engine. Many games who then had much more sophisticated scripting and storylines than Elite Force. Elite Force, of course, it was. You have to view it in the context that 2 years before it was just came together out of the Quake 3 engine, and they had to. Well, they did a fantastic job. One has to say that.
Yeah,
Ravensoft.
I mean, that period of time as well, video games were evolving so quickly in terms of just how sophisticated they could be, and the kinds of storytelling and narrative that it was only 4 or 5 years earlier that Quake and Doom was around, and then by 2001 we had Half-Life 2, which to this day looks like it was released yesterday. It's incredible. Like I don't know how they did that, but when you look at where Elite Force slots in, I genuinely think it was actually part of pushing that envelope. And again, for a Star Trek game, which is incredible, right? I think we were so lucky to get this game. Like it honestly was.
It's so very Star Trek as well that it pushes the envelope. Star Trek always pushed the envelope in terms of effects and showing technologies that would one day become real, like the communicator and all these things where they are looking ahead. And they do the same with the game, and they push the envelope through this game. And so I think it's very fitting that it's a Star Trek game that gets to explore these possibilities.
And also sometimes very, very Trekky. We had this a moment ago, assimilation mode, It wasn't just your run-of-the-mill shooter. It wasn't just Quake being retextured. They actually put in more there. And I think assimilation mode is as Trek as it gets there. And it was really like, this is Voyager, big bad guy, Borg. We have this. It kind of comes naturally, and they put an entire game mode around that.
Yes, those were the specialty modes that came with the expansion pack. I remember this one. There's also... Okay, and my question to you would be, did you play this mode a lot, actually? These specialty modes, or the simulation modes, or those new modes that came with the expansion pack?
I can say specialties not, but assimilation I actually do enjoy. It's a fixed part of my map cycle.
Oh, okay. Yes, on your server. Yes.
Yeah.
Yes. Yes.
I didn't play it as much as I probably played the sort of default modes, but I really did think that it added something a bit different. It was a good palette cleanser sometimes to go from a regular holo match or a team holo match or the capture the flag, and then play something that's sort of tactically very different with assimilation. So I didn't play it all the time, but I think that was more because I tended to play on servers that had the most players, and those tended to be the more default modes.
Yeah.
But I liked assimilation, and I think again it was something that was a little bit different to try, and they were pushing the envelope there a little bit, and they were trying to see what they could do within the confines of that engine.
I especially loved assimilation when you had these big maps, Derelict 1, 2, 3, also other in-game ship maps. It made so much of an immersion factor for me. It's, for me, more or less the favorite game mode, even though sadly it's hard to find players for it.
I mean,
maybe we should play it later.
I mean, I would say as well, like that is another example of how Elite Force kind of pushed the envelope a little bit, because in those days, like, it was all about the deathmatch and capture the flag, right? And those were like the game modes everybody played. If you look at some more modern games these days, probably, I'm trying to think of examples off the top of my head, but it feels like there are more games these days that lean closer to what assimilation mode was than just straight up team deathmatch, right? It's definitely like a more complicated approach to multiplayer, which again you didn't see a lot of in those days. Like, it was,
I mean, it was in general a more creative phase. They were trying things. They were coming up with new concepts. I mean, if you look at Counter-Strike, if you look at the bomb scenario, it's essentially a variation of capture the flag. And the simulation mode, so to say, would be similar to this VIP mode from Counter-Strike. And you were seeing that the developers, the game designers, were looking for means of spicing up the game. They were looking at things that they already had, and they were messing around with them. And assimilation mode is one of these offspring. And it was really, in my opinion, one of the most exciting times, because they were still messing around with stuff. They were trying things. They were throwing things at the wall and looking what was sticking. And today, I think this is a little bit missing. People do what works. That's what they do. There is no...
The video gaming industry seems very safe.
Yeah,
when
exactly.
it comes to trying to do new things. Like, you know, in these AAA titles, they're not going to be doing anything that's too experimental. That's more of a sort of like B tier or an indie level video game. So that's why you get sort of like these 100 reskins of something like Call of Duty. And, you know, Call of Duty Zombies, for example, okay, that's, again, a bit different. That's a variation on a theme. But they're not really pushing the envelope in the same way now, because there's so many hundreds of millions of dollars behind all these games that it has to be a success. It can't afford to fail. And so they're not going to do anything that really, like I said, pushes the envelope.
No, that's absolutely correct. Like, the way the AAA game industry is these days, like, they absolutely need a game to be successful. So they are very conservative. But I think what is really cool is the way that the indie scene has kind of come in to kind of take up the mantle a little bit. And a lot of that was born out of the modding community, actually, because if you look at games like Counter-Strike or even things like PUBG or, you know, tons of these kind of games that kind of actually started out life as a mod, which is where a lot of that innovation kind of happens now, and then have become mods in of themselves, and then modding kind of led into the indie scene, right? So I love seeing what people are coming up with on, you know, indie publishers or itch.io or places where people are just creating like cool new ideas. But you don't really see it in the AAA space anymore, which is a shame, because, like I say, I think this really was like that 10 years, like from 95 to 2005 was the golden era of innovation. Like, so much changed in those 10 years. It was incredible.
Feels like we're plateauing a bit now. And I play a lot of games that are like newer, and I enjoy them a lot, and they often have something sort of new to offer in some respect or another. But I keep coming back to Elite Force. I keep coming back to the early 2000s Star Trek games, not just because I'm a Star Trek fan, but because there's something compelling about them in a way that I'm not going to get that experience from something more modern, even if it's not a Star Trek game. So, like, something... I'd love to see a Mass Effect style Star Trek game. I'd love to see something that uses that template in with that universe and that IP. But aside from that, I don't really know what would be successful using the Star Trek IP now. And I think that it would be a hollow shell compared to something like Elite Force. It would probably be a what's the expression? It would just be a wraparound. it wouldn't be something that would truly use the IP to its full potential. And we saw that with something like the 2009, was it 2010, the Star Trek game that came out for the Kelvin timeline. That wasn't super successful, and it kind of distilled Star Trek down into just being a shooter with an endless gauntlet of shooting Gorn. And it was fine, it was entertaining, but it didn't feel very Star Trek. It didn't feel like it had the heart of Star Trek like Elite Force does. And a lot of that comes down to the focus on lore and continuity and on the world building.
I feel the Kelvin timeline has kind of the problem that there was J.J. Abrams involved. He also had his fingers in Star Wars, and I didn't watch those movies then either, so... Okay, yeah. I think we digress here.
But I think it's an important statement that a shooter game in the Star Trek universe did work out a lot better than actual films and shows lately. Kind of weird, but it is like that.
Well, Elite Force actually was released around the time Star Trek as a franchise was starting to suffer from franchise fatigue, right? Like it was, Voyager had reached the end of its run. Star Trek Enterprise, obviously. I mean, in hindsight, I actually really love Star Trek Enterprise, but at the time it was a little bit...
Oh, yeah.
Okay, what's this? Why are we doing this? Which I think we were a little bit unfair to it, so I'm kind of sad it only had a few seasons anyway. And then obviously like Star Trek Nemesis came out around that time, which was a bit of a... Again, in hindsight, I think it wasn't as terrible as it was, but I think the franchise fatigue was real, right? Like we'd had so much Star Trek since 1988.
It definitely was an issue. I like Star Trek Enterprises a lot as well, and at the time I didn't have as much of a problem with it as a lot of Star Trek fans did. I do think it's aged better though. I do think that it does feel like one of the big ones in the same way that Voyager and Deep Space Nine and Next Generation are. I feel like it is part of that family and not so separate as it felt perhaps at the time. The newer shows are the newer shows, and they don't really have a bearing with this, but it was definitely starting to feel like they needed to reinvent Star Trek by the time we got to about 2002, by the time of Star Trek Nemesis, a film that I also really quite liked. Wasn't perfect, and it definitely had its flaws, but yeah, it was time to rest the franchise a bit, and I don't blame them for doing that.
And I do wonder if that had an impact on Star Trek Elite Force, and specifically as well Elite Force 2, which wasn't, because I don't know whether this is a well-known fact or no, I mean, but I don't know whether this is a well-known fact or not, but even though the game sold really well...
You mean Elite Force 2?
Elite Force 1 as well.
Yeah, Elite Force 1 I know, but did Elite Force 2 sell well?
I think it was an issue of Elite Force 2 where they lost the license, didn't they, pretty quickly after it was released. So they didn't... It was the same problem they had with Star Trek Starfleet Command 3, where they released that and Elite Force 2 around the same time their license agreement was about to expire. And so they weren't able to release it in as big a way as they did Elite Force 1, if I recall.
My understanding for Elite Force 1 as well, though, and I could be wrong, and maybe you know better than me, but my understanding for Star Trek Elite Force 1, Voyager Elite Force 1, was that it sold well, but it didn't sell to expectations, certainly not for Activision and Raven anyway. Like
the first one.
It sold well by standards of, a lot of people bought the game and it did really well and became popular. And I think in those days as well, a lot of people probably pirated the game as well, right? So you can't necessarily trust the numbers. Okay. But it didn't sell to expectations, which is, I think Activision expected it to sell more copies than it did. Mm-hmm. And I wonder whether the franchise fatigue was a part of that as well, because I genuinely think the game itself was so solid that I don't fully understand why that was the case. But
I think there's much competition also. Elite Force 2, at the time that Elite Force 2 was coming out, there was so much competition from other games unrelated to Star Trek. And I think where we had with Elite Force, we had still people who were not absolute Trekkies who would play the game on its own merit.
Yes.
And I guess this was not so much the case anymore for Elite Force 2. And Elite Force 2 always failed to build up a huge multiplayer landscape because they made fundamental errors when they released the game. And in my view, they made two very big errors. The first error was they took a really very long time until they had a Linux dedicated server out there. The Linux dedicated server is important for one reason, because at those days, computer center and Linux servers were that cheap compared to Windows, where you had to buy a Windows license, and they would, back in those days, I ran my own server also. I still do. I still have my own server. So while Linux servers were kind of cheap, you paid like $50 per month, and you could have your server hosted in a big data center with a big connection, and where you could run your servers. You couldn't do this, or Windows servers, you could do this also, I think, but it was much more expensive, much more cumbersome to run these. I think you paid like double to have those servers running. And so it
was much more stable as well, wasn't it? Because I don't know if you recall, but not only was a Windows server license incredibly expensive, but good luck trying to get that to stay stable after 90 days, because I'm pretty sure it would collapse into it.
Oh, yeah. Yes. Well, I personally, myself, I switched to Linux when I was 14. When in 1999, I started, it's enough of this shit, this Windows shit. I grew up with MS-DOS. I typed in Win to start Windows 3.11. those days. And in 1999, all of my friends were going Linux, and I said, okay, let's go Linux. And this is how I came into this kind of environment of running servers. And at the time when Elite Force 2 came out in the forums there, it came out, they did not have a dedicated server that you could run on your server in your data center that would have the connection and the power to run big games with many players, because each player hogs about 10 kilobits per second. That's about the number that you have on your dial-up connection. You cannot host more than 3-4 people. That's not possible. And in those data centers, you could, obviously. And I also had a server, and I had a Linux server, of course, and I very much would have liked to run an Elite Force 2 server, but it was not possible because they did not have the dedicated server out there. This was different with Elite Force 1. I think they had the dedicated server out almost the same time, or not much later than the release date. They had the Linux dedicated server out there.
There were different versions over time, but they were fairly soon after any release.
And it took ages in Elite Force 2, so there were not many servers to begin with. Only whatever was happening to run Windows and had the luck to have a big pipe.
And especially if you consider who were the people running those servers back then, it was fans, gamers, enthusiasts who basically did this for shits and giggles. It costs money and you're doing this for fun. You're on a tight budget then. And this is a showstopper, essentially.
And at those times, I was like 17. I wasn't working. I was working on what my parents were giving me, and I had a very, very little job at the theater, at the local theater in Stuttgart. I was doing extra for ballet and opera. I was getting on average, like 100 euros a month. So you couldn't do much with this. And I actually offered on the forums for Ritual, they were called back then, for Elite Force 2. I told them I would port the Elite Force server for them. I would do it. They didn't take up my offer. Obviously not. They didn't know me. It's just some kid from Germany who is probably wanting to do things. He doesn't know what he's talking about. And I thought, I don't have to port the rendering engine. I don't have to speak with any graphics drivers. It's just the bloody server. How hard can it be to port it from Windows to Linux? Because in those days, I was also deep into C coding, which was obviously the prerequisite for also working on the Quake 3 source code to port it over to Elite Force.
Well, I mean, this discussion kind of makes me think as well about why we are able to sit here today and actually get together and talk about Star Trek Elite Forces, because the entire success of the first game and the reason why we all still get together and play and talk about this game is just because of the community, and specifically the modding community and the multiplayer aspect of it. And I think those were the two pieces of the puzzle that, because the Elite Force 2, I really enjoyed the single player campaign. I thought it was really well done. But without the modding, because modding was there, but it was a lot harder from what I experienced anyway. Like, it was way less accessible. And the multiplayer was just not there. And those two things that game stalled, which is really a shame. But I think it also is a testament to why the first game is so successful and still is successful, because the community of the people who are kind of driving that forward, right?
So I can tell you, if you're interested, I can tell you a bit about how then the Elite Force engine port came about. You just have to tell me. It was a great time. So I don't know whether that's the right moment right now. Are you interested?
Yeah,
You tell us a bit about it, yeah.
I know your zip rep basically, but hearing it again in your own words would be interesting.
My what? Sorry, my.
The short version, like messing around in the beginning and then finding it easier than I thought.
Yeah, my README, yes. So Quake 3 source code was released by ID Software. So people right away, because Quake 3 was always much bigger in the modding community. There were many more mods. It's crazy what the Quake 3 people did. The movement was really interesting, because you could use the Quake 3 movement to make great jumps for capture the flag and clan wars and all this aspect of multiplayer. This was the movement of Quake 3, bunny jumping or straight jumping and getting speed, and it was kind of an art form. And right away after ID Software released their engine, the ioQuake 3 project from America, was a guy, Zachary Slater, was his name. He kind of was a project lead. He was saying, hey, I want this, and was really great at building a community and getting coders together to work on the Quake 3 source code. And what they did with the source code from ID Software is they added a building system for all those different platforms. They ported it to macOS. They ported it to even to Sparks and SGI machines. This is, those are those big machines that cost like $4,000 per machine, or even more, 10,000. Doesn't matter. They ported it all to all those other platforms. And I was wondering, okay, why not just download it and try to build this engine for yourself on your own computer? So it was actually quite easy. So I was on my Linux computer. My shell would be downloading it and would go into the directory, would enter make, and the game just starts building and builds through, and then you have the result, and then you can execute the Quake 3 beta and can use this result you just built your own engine, and then you can use this result to run Quake 3 with this. And I was just absolutely curious, what could you do with this? Can this engine run Elite Force? I was really curious. Can it do it? So I just put this building result from ioQuake 3 project. I just put it to the directory of the Elite Force data, base EF, would start it up, and the screen went black, nothing came. I was kind of, okay, that's expected. What can you expect? It's a different engine. You can't expect it to run all this data. I was just moving my mouse around, and just suddenly I would be hearing these clicks. These clicks when you start multiplayer, and then you would hear those blips, blip, 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 and you would hear the outcast button. I was like, oh, this kind of works. I'm not seeing anything, but it works. So this was the point where I was then thinking myself, okay, you got this far without doing a single thing. How hard can it be to get further? So I looked at the code. I looked at the code that was participating in loading up the game. So what you would do as a coder is actually not that hard. You would just compile the program with debugging symbols, it's called, and you would start the game inside the debugger. And then you can do what you can do inside the debugger is you can go by every source code line. You can say, okay, now execute this line. Now go to this line. Go to this line. So you can see what's happening in real time as the game is loading its data. It's not a hard concept. And what I saw there is they had a slight incompatibility in the graphics data and settings. I think it was the resolution wasn't being communicated properly so that the game couldn't actually initialize the display correctly. And this was because the Quake 3 engine from 2005 was already much more further developed by ID Software. They continued development on the engine constantly. And what ended up happening is that the expansion pack of Elite Force data was about, because they also got those updates up to the point of the expansion pack from the ID Software engine up to point release 1.17. This is this big point release from Quake 3. This was a big milestone, I guess, for them. And this was the state of the engine that the Elite Force version of multiplayer was stuck with. And in the year of 2005, I think the Quake 3 engine was already point release 121, 122, something like this. These numbers, no matter, they continued doing stuff with the Quake 3 engine, so that in certain areas it wasn't quite compatible anymore. So I just fixed this resolution problem, and already had with the ioQuake 3 engine, I could already see the icons. It was just there. The menu was there. I could click at buttons. It would just work. And then I thought, okay, let's get this working. And what in the end I had to do is to kind of backport all those changes that happened between 1.17 and the latest Quake 3. I would have to look it up what the real number is. But I kind of had to make all those changes, had to revert them back to the old state of the old point release, and doing the step by step, many more things in Quake in Elite Force would start working. So it was a bit, well, someone said it correctly. I had too much time. Yes, that's true. I had too much time. But I learned a lot.
How much time actually?
I guess.
You get to give it an estimate. What amount of time did you invest?
That take? Yeah.
It was probably. I really cannot remember well anymore. I have to. I don't know.
More the weeks or more the month realm?
It was for loading the first map, for being able to load the map. It was probably half a year, I guess. It was probably half a year to get this to work. It's not a full-time job, of course, obviously not. So there are many obstacles I had to overcome, and I did have some help from outside, because someone with connections, I cannot remember his name anymore, but there were really two big problems only that I had with this thing. Is most of those issues were quite minor. I could just execute the game in the debugger, and I could see that, okay, here I still have to fix this, then this is going to work again, then I have to fix this, then. But the two major issues were the network code, namely how do you communicate with the server? Because obviously someone at ID Software had too much time and started to implement a completely new network stack. Or not completely new, but that would work in a very different manner, because what they did is they would be going to a Huffman coding that's from coding theory, that's really high. Mm-hmm. It kind of compresses your data stream to the server a bit better than what they had before. It's not that much better, but it was better by like 40% maybe, I would guess, but it would make the connection to servers incompatible. So what I could do is I could already play against myself on maps, because the server and the client would be the same ioQuake 3 implementation, but I couldn't join the original Elite Force servers. And there I had some auspicious help from outside. Obviously, someone would be giving me one C file. That's one code file, the msg.c. That's the file that implements the network stack. And so I could see where all the bit fields are in the communication from the old point release 1.17. And then I was indeed able to backport the network stack. And actually, my last ioQuake 3 engine, what I had is actually dual stack. So the server supports both protocols. You can connect with an ioQuake 3 client using the improved network code, but it's no harm if you connect with an old Elite Force client, because the server will detect that.
And I think people are actually doing this. They're running Quake servers on that thing. I've seen
no,
this.
you can't play Quake 3 with it, but you can. What I mean is, you can use the new improved lower bandwidth network code from the newest Quake 3 for playing ioQuake 3, or you can also connect with older clients. Both detect that, okay, for example, if the client connects to an old dedicated server, he knows, okay, I have to switch back to the old protocol, it works too. And the second big problem I was talking about is the models, because the character models, actually. Because the character models were in Quake 3 were used and animated using the MD3 format, and Elite Force had the MD4 format, which was not very common. And up to this day, I think there's not really someone else who's using this, because it was a skeletal format, so you would animate bones inside those models, and there's some code and logic behind how the flash that you see would be attached to those bones, and then you just animate the bone, you move the bone from left to right, and the arm follows and stuff like this. This did not exist in the Quake 3 engine, and I think I got the code for this from somewhere else. That's too long ago, I don't know. But those two were the biggest obstacles, and after that, actually, it works fine. And it turns out I had to do so much fundamental work in the ioQuake 3 engine for this that I was actually for quite some time maintainer for the Quake 3 engine for the ioQuake 3 project. Maybe I'm even still on the list, but well, I have to admit my life moved on and my contributions have also subsided. So it's just kind of a history how all this ioQuake 3 stuff came about. And I can only encourage you. Well, it's a nice entry into programming, actually, because having a debugger, just loading the game code into the debugger and having the computer execute every line of code for you, you learn so much doing this that everybody can.
I was going to say, this sounds like it must have been a really big learning experience, and it's not the sort of thing that I feel like a lot of gamers today, younger gamers with modern games, are going to be encountering and sort of contributing towards in the same way. So, like, it's very impressive on a technical level, and it's also very of its time, I guess, because there isn't that need or that sort of desire to try and achieve these things now, I feel.
I mean, it's always a motivation thing. If you have the motivation, maybe I can get EF working on an open source engine, if it is not too much. This is a goal that I can understand. Like, okay, a free EF, imagine that, not company driven, I can fix security bugs, stuff like that. One hand side is the motivation, and I think you will find people with the motivation. But on the other hand, you also need the tenacity. You have to stick with it. This is the tricky part.
Yeah, and the tenacity was there because I was so deeply involved in the community and was doing so much multiplayer, actually, and spending so much time. And actually, one of the questions in preparation for this meeting was, what were the defining maps that you would be playing? And I still remember very well that when I got the network stack for the original Elite Force server working again, I was like, of course, I was so proud. And I was immediately joining a server and playing was map Danger City. Does anyone of you know the map Danger City?
Yeah.
I also saw those questions and I thought to myself, okay, what is the most iconic multiplayer map for Elite Force 1? And I had two answers. One of them was Delta Station, which is one of the original Capture the Flag maps. I think that's pretty iconic for Elite Force Holo Match. But then I thought about modded, user-generated maps, and Danger City was so much fun. And it was, I don't remember if that was a recreation of a map from a different game or not. I don't know.
Yes, it was. I know, actually, I've spoken to the guy. I remember that I spoke to him, or I interviewed him in my capacity as the one who was working for hazardteam.de. He was a German guy, I guess. I would have to look deeply into email archives. And I guess he came from the Quake 3 modding world. There were actually really many people who came over from the Quake 3 modding world. And one of those big examples that came from Quake 3 modding was pad mod. Not pad mod, but yeah, pad maps. The pad maps. So
Right,
do you remember
Like
the
Pad Kitchen.
Pad kitchen, garden,
Oh,
pad. Also, those were maps that would have been played a lot.
The Pad Kitchen one was absolutely my favorite. I don't know why it's entertaining to be a tiny person in a giant kitchen, but it is. And
I mean, as they say, it was kind of the style at that time. You know, Red's maps in CS, same concept. You see the view, you view the world from tiny.
It just mixes up the perspective a bit. But Danger City for me was definitely, probably from my perspective, the most popular and one of the most used multiplayer maps in Elite Force that was user generated. And I love playing on that. Hope we get to later.
And I think it's just because it was so different from the traditional maps that were being made because most of the maps were Star Trek based or reusing like assets from the base maps, whereas Danger City was just like, this is completely fresh and new.
I think
It was carnage.
Because Star Trek is niche and Elite Force was niche. Quake 3 at the same time was much, much bigger than the Elite Force community. Of course, there was less content. I mean, mod content, external content that you could load into your game for Elite Force. And this could be fixed by just converting your maps from Quake 3 to Elite Force, which was not hard to do because the GTK rating, I guess, you would probably just have to choose from a drop-down menu at some point and say, okay, and now I want to place this map for Elite Force instead of Quake 3. And in this way, you could also pretty easily get the Quake 3 stuff into Elite Force 2, which was great.
I was literally about to ask you how difficult would it have been to convert a map from Quake 3 Arena to Elite Force, because
I've never done it.
I would have thought there would be quirky little things like size of the character might be different, so you might get stuck in a doorway, or the pickups are different, so you might need to just go around and replace. I'm not sure.
I actually don't think so, because Quake 3 and Elite Force always shared the same technology base. I guess they were really, really close together. I don't think it would be too hard to. The stuff obviously that would be different is you wouldn't have.
Yeah, I do remember in those days.
Placing the shield, the weapons, which weapon to place where, which weapon maps to which one.
Because you wouldn't want all the weapons on the map to all be the arc welder, for example. I mean, actually, that does sound like a fun game mode, to be fair. But you would want that variety. You'd need to program which ones were going to go where based on Elite Force parameters rather than Quake.
Yeah, but I myself was never an artist, and at school I was horrible at art. I can't draw shit. I was always the coder. I was always on the coder side, and I was just for interest. I was looking into those tools. So, yes, I know that GTK Radiance supports all those different things. You just have to load the game data. You know, the brushes and the format is pretty similar between all those games, and so it would probably be quite easy to convert between the games.
To be honest, now that I think about it, I do remember there was a lot of crossover between the Quake 3 based game, because I seem to remember there was a Star Wars game that was also based on Quake 3 Arena.
Yes.
I think maybe was it Jedi Knight? Jedi Knight.
Jedi Knight 2, yes.
Jedi Outcast?
Yeah.
Jedi Knight 2 and Outcast, yes.
And I seem to
recall... also made by Ravensoft. The second one was made by Ravensoft also, yes.
Yeah, it was. It was a counterpart to Elite Force at the time, Jedi Knight, Jedi Outcast. And another game I loved and I played hours of, and it definitely had similarities, just, if nothing else, in the gameplay feel. But in the level design, the character models, there was similarities. And I do look at that as the Star Wars counterpart to Elite Force. Great game. Very much worth playing.
Yes, it was a great game, but this is also what I was saying earlier. Jedi Knight came, I think, about 2 years after Elite Force, right?
Yeah, it was 2002, I think, yeah.
You could already see that the development of the game engine in-house in Ravensoft took a very different path from what standard Quake 3 was doing, I think. This is what it looked to me as an outsider. And I don't know how many of you have. Any of you have software development backgrounds? Because I myself am a software developer actually right now, and you are. Saturn. Okay.
Different department, but yeah.
And the way this thing in real life plays out is, well, Ravensoft buys the engine from ID Software, and the engine, this is like, I don't know, like 200,000 lines of code. And so you develop on your own code base that is in your company, the other company, or even in the same company, the other team works on the same code base that started as the same code base, but that then took a very different path.
It will diverge fairly quickly.
Yes, this happens fairly quickly during software development, and it must be a conscious effort if you want to integrate the changes that another team made back into your engine. And
if you can at all.
Yes, and the Jedi Knight 2 team, I think they made pretty significant changes further. Maybe they took even the Elite Force engine as a base. I don't know. A Ravensoft worker could tell us better. But it took a longer path, and this is probably the only reason why I was able to do this engine conversion, because the HoloMatch part of Elite Force was still so similar to what the Quake 3 path actually had. It would have been much more difficult if you would try to port the multiplayer mode from Jedi Knight 2. I believe someone even tried and failed to do it based off my work that I started, I believe.
I mean, you can tell that Jedi Knight 2 was a more advanced game, technically more advanced game when it came out, like just because it had to incorporate things like lightsaber combat and the third-person perspective that you could switch to, and then there was a bit more vertical level design in places too. But to me, it is very much of the same cloth, if that makes sense.
It is actually. The thing is, you must understand that when you do something, what I did for IO Elite Force, this backport, I did not have access to the source code for many things. I had to reverse engineer often. I had to look at, okay, how is the game doing it? Then I would, from time to time, I would try to make the frame rate of the original slower. And then I saw, for example, the animation of the U-mod. When you shoot out with the U-mod that penetrates Borg shields, it shoots out a beam. And around this beam, they have these circling animation of those two stripes that just circle around the stream. I was looking at that in slow motion and was recreating that on my own in the source code of the backport from my engine, because this was implemented in the engine back in those days. Oftentimes, it's with guesswork that turned out to be correct. And for those two things that I told you about, for the network code, for the models, I needed those external code where actually we could see the code, what they did. And this would have been because Elite Force at that time didn't stray too much from the path that the standard Quake 3 engine took. Because sometimes I would still find old code that was commented out, and with time, I came to realize that this code that was no longer active, there was old code, there was some comments there. And then after some time, it crystallized to me, okay, this is the code that's still running today now in Elite Force. So it just had to bring this code back in, throw the new code out, and Elite Force would start working again with this respect for this feature that I thought. So it was a manageable effort. It wasn't too much. So now you have Jedi Knight. Jedi Knight took the left path. Quake 3 plus Elite Force took the right path, and Jedi Knight bringing those two back together would be hard. And with Quake 3, I just had to go back on one branch.
Yeah, nice.
I still remember when I had the network stack running, I was then entering Danger City and was so proud and was like, okay, this is not the original stvoyhn.exe running anymore. I'm running this on the ioQuake 3 engine. I was so proud. But it turns out that this was also a bit dangerous for me because I was called a cheater.
Oh, yeah.
Because with this,
oh, of course. Yeah, I suppose there is that.
Yeah.
Because with this new engine, what ended up happening, and what I did not revert yet back, also changed the way that sound would attenuate with distance. So what ended up happening is I would be in Danger City in this big house thing, you know, with the garage, with the big door that would close up and down. And I was in there and could hear all those guys from miles away. I could hear they're there, and they were like, I couldn't hear you. How could you hear me? I was going out and was just shooting. And you must have an aimbot. You must have...
Accidental sound hacking, yeah.
Sure. No bad intention. I guess it's frustrating. I brag you, and yes, I know, I guess. And what I did then was, okay, it's my engine, but okay, let's look at it. And I looked at it, and what turned out is they changed the way that sound attenuates with distance. And what I had to do for Elite Force is just make it that it's again about on par with what the original game was doing. I couldn't recreate it exactly, I think, because Quake 3 is using a different audio subsystems audio driver. It's using OpenAL.
Yes.
And what you can actually do with this is you could actually have room with the new engine. You could actually have, with 6 speakers, you could have full surround sound if you wanted. And if you knew where to fix the screws at the right point, it's probably not quite easy, but you can do this with the original engines. Okay, this is how this came about. And now I'm seeing, well, many people have carried this torch forward. I've seen Zack Turtleman.
Yes,
he's been doing Lilium Voyager. Just keeping those games running, and well,
I mean, mostly he's merging the stuff that is coming in from the ioQuake original, and this is what I'm actually basing my builds on, because, as I said, not everybody can build that themselves, but it's one of the forks. But there's also another guy out there, Ruminor, who based another engine on that, and you could say while Lilium is a little bit more conservative, more original to what you produced, what the original game was all about, Ruminor adds a bunch of features in there, like, okay, you can have much more maps in there, you have map management in a way in there, like, okay, different servers may have the same file name but different file. You know, back then that was a problem. When you came to a server and your file differed from what they had, you were in trouble. And his engine, for example, accounts for that. You can have the same file per server, meaning different files actually.
Okay, so
and stuff like that.
Well, okay, I think I've hogged enough time already. If you like, I can even go much deeper into technical details. It's also interesting in the respect with how companies, inside companies, you develop a game, how those different teams work together. Because those architectural decisions that I see in the Quake 3 engine also tell me a story about what kind of teams those guys at Ravensoft and ID Software, the makeup of those teams, and it's really quite fascinating how those play together. Then there's the game code. This is some kind of, which works kind of similarly to Java, where you just compile your game code. That's those QVM files that you pack into those PK3 files for modding your game. And then there's the engine itself, and then there's also always the question, how much can you do on this game code level? How much do you have to change in the engine to get the desired effect? And this is obviously a tight dance between engine developers and game developers who develop the game logic, where to play the HUD, where to...
But it was an interesting decision, actually. There was this SDK for the game code, so you could actually review the game code. You can modify this game code, compile that stuff with the tools they handed you, and mod your game. Again, a move that you wouldn't see today, probably, that you are actually being handed the code of a piece of software that is part of the game.
In a AAA game now, you wouldn't see that in even
Most
the game
certainly
below
not.
that tier. It would be something that they either let you do within the game itself, or you'd have to create your own workaround somehow if you had the know-how. And fewer people have the know-how now.
Well, the other scenario with the games I work with, like Frostpunk and Stalker 2, they're Unreal Engine games. So it's a bit of a hybrid where they kind of release an SDK which is based on the Unreal editor, but they're obviously not releasing any source code or any like source files and things like that. So, and it's way harder actually to create mods in something like Unreal Engine than it was with the actual toolkit that you had for Quake 3 Arena. So I think with the world we're in, where we're basically consolidated to 2 engines, because you'd have to be completely insane to build your own game engine in 2025. Yeah, that's what I was kind of alluding to earlier. I think it's a little bit harder now to kind of go to as deep as we could with the tools we had for Quake.
But
Quake 3
that may speak to the issue that you mentioned earlier, that Half-Life 2 doesn't look all that worse than games nowadays. When you say all games today share basically 2 engines, well, you get always the same technical basis for it. And
I mean, it's like reviewing Elite Force. Yeah, back then we had this. You had Elite Force, you had Moha, you had Jedi Knight. When you play these games, you can feel they are of the same family, but you had more families back then.
And some of these custom game engines still live on today, but they're very much legacy game engines. Like there are a few, but most games do tend to be built in Unreal Engine, which is a wonderful, wonderful engine in many ways. But it's also, I don't know, I'm not an engineer, so I know enough to be dangerous. But it does feel to me that they seem to be very general purpose. So it's not like game engines can be as optimized to the kind of game you're trying to build, right? Like it does feel like, yeah.
I mean, if you want to sell this stuff, it makes sense. You can't have a shooter engine for an RTS, so it makes sense to be more generic.
Well, probably the decision of the split, because between the game logic and the engine itself, maybe it was really also a conscious decision to make because they wanted to support the modder community. These days, I think the necessity for these QVM files that are being, by the way, compiled every time you load a map, the engine loads the QVM file that contains the game logic, which tells you how fast those weapons shoot and so on, and can do some stuff with it. And it compiles it into your memory as executable code every time you load a map. It happens. And these days you don't see this anymore so much because you have much more scripting. You script your engine these days because your computers are so fast. The bottleneck is no longer the processor when you have 8 processors or 16. The bottleneck these days is the graphics card, because actually those games just push all the data. They tell the graphics card, hey, graphics cards, here are all the vertices, here are all the textures, combine them, print them out, and the software then is only controlling when to move which item and where. And a lot of this can be scripted these days, and the speed penalty you have for having a script interpreter is not that high anymore these days. And I would expect actually many games to be more customizable because of this fact. For example, Minecraft, I know they use Lua scripting, right? Something like that.
Yeah,
so
Lua
you can actually...
it's quite popular these days. A lot of games are starting to embrace things like Lua because it's a much more accessible scripting language for this kind of thing, yeah.
Yes, and for making a mod for Elite Force, you still needed to have the LLVM compiler in a certain version to create, because those mods are also coded in C. They are also C code, standard C code. So actually, if you have the knowledge on how to make C code for mods, you also have the knowledge on how to modify the engine. This is, by the way, neat, I think.
But it gave us such niceties as like pinball mode. Totally different concept.
Yeah, I've forgotten that.
Yeah, I remember.
Oh, yeah.
The first time I heard of this, it was like, yeah, okay, interesting. And it totally changes how you have to work. It doesn't help you to just fire at the guy like crazy. You know, all those, I can frag you with 2 shots, guys. Yeah, okay, nice try, but you do 0 damage here. Go check again what you have to do.
Since we are currently at the subject of mods, I would say let's go directly into that. Chris mentioned that it would be a big benefit for the Elite Force community to have in general a mod manager, map manager, which makes it quite easy to install and deinstall stuff. I'm not sure, was there ever something similar? I know from different games they have that, but not Elite Force.
I don't think Elite Force ever did it?
We never,
It
no,
had,
not really ever had a mod manager.
No, but
It did have some. Yeah, it had something.
mods.
I've kind of
It
been
definitely
toying
does.
with the idea of making one, actually. I haven't actually delved into scoping it out or actually doing any work on it, but it has crossed my mind because maybe you guys have a different opinion, but the way most of the mods are packaged, at least certainly on Gamefront, the vast majority are just a PK3 file, which just need to be in the base EF directory. So a mod manager might not be terribly complicated to make for Elite Force.
Yeah, I mean, 99 out of 100 mods were PK3s.
Elite Force have
Yeah, like that's all it was.
Doesn't Elite Force have a mod manager inside its UI already?
No,
I think it has.
Let me check.
There is something where you can activate mods.
Yes.
Is that?
Yeah, but I
Yes,
feel like that
there
was
is
never
something
used
from
for
that.
anything. I feel like that didn't
Rarely.
very rarely to actually for that purpose, even though it had it. It was.
I mean, it
Right
depends
there,
if you were starting
modification.
a server or if you were joining one. If you were joining one, you didn't have to do anything because the
Right,
game
yeah.
just picked it
Yes,
for you.
it's
If you were running a server, you usually gave it on the command line, like run this
Yes.
folder, not the base EF folder, and do it. But you can actually in-game select that. It is possible.
Well, actually, the mods also were living in the same base EF folder, weren't
Yeah.
they?
It depends. You had mods that were actually inside the BACF folder because there was still game code wise Elite Force. But let's say you use Pinball, it's a different game. So it had its own folder. So it kind of
Yeah, but
depended
I
on what
think-
kind of mod
yes.
it is.
Yes, but I think that's a feature that was only added in ioQuake 3 because I added it. I remember adding this feature. You had to set a certain C-bar, let's like come base game or something, and then you could completely switch the game over. So the game wouldn't require you to enter a CD key or something. Yes.
There were two mods that I can think of. Both of them were quite big mods, and I'm not sure that you had to do the whole PK3 in the base EF for it. And I think these are two big mods that are worth talking about anyway if we're celebrating the 25th anniversary of the game. And one of them was Colony 7, which was a single player storyline mod, fully voiced by.
I played that one too. Yes, I remember.
Yeah, and that was really good fun. I really enjoyed playing that.
Yes, it was great. Oh,
I don't know if anyone else had the
it was
experience of playing that one. It was a fun
I did,
storyline
I
about a Federation mining outpost, and they discover when they mine on this planet this ancient civilization, and there's a whole sort of conspiracy storyline about that. They get attacked by the Cleons, so that was pretty memorable for me. And the other one was the Starbase 11 mod, which was again that had a sequel also, which was the Virtual Dreadnought, if I'm correct, and that was based on the original series, and it was a really weird kind of snapshot in time, almost like a holodeck simulation of the Starbase 11 scene from the original series, massively expanded. It had its own holodeck simulations, it had its own weapons. It was a total conversion mod, more or less. And I think that also had like a slightly different way of installing it. Both of those mods are the most memorable total conversions that I remember. Both of them were great fun. And for anyone who hasn't tried them out and wants to see a sort of different side to Elite Force and something that's truly made by the community, both Starbase 11 and Colony 7 are
I
worth
believe
checking out.
those are already based on the ioQuake 3 version, right? Or are they still compatible with the original Elite Force?
They're compatible with the original. I think you probably needed the patch,
Okay.
but apart from that, oh no, you might have needed the expansion pack as well.
Okay.
I seem to recall with the Colony 7 anyway that you did have to like replace the exe file and stuff like that. Like I think they did.
Yes,
There was
yes,
a
I think you're right.
Because I know that there were quite some forks, not also from Set Turtle Man. There were a few other guys who then used those forks.
On a side note, I took the liberty looking it up. The single player and the multiplayer original game do have a mod management in there. You can select a mod, and essentially what you're doing there is you pick another folder.
It never really took, apart from those examples you just gave, it never really took up for the single player, right? Modding.
Not sure actually.
There were some mods that, for example, changed the hazard suits to just be regular Starfleet uniforms, just to make it seem a bit more like the TV show. There were some mods that changed weapons so that the phaser rifle was more like the compression phaser rifles from the series. There were some mods like that, and there were 2 or 3 bigger story mods or total conversions. But no, it was mostly the multiplayer and really RPGX that had the benefit of new maps and new mods. And all the skins, of course, were designed to be used in HoloMatch. So there were a few things for single player that I can remember. There are probably more if I did some research, but those are the ones that come to mind.
There were a few interesting projects for single player that I actually really liked. One of them, I don't know if you remember, something called Insurrection Alpha, and I don't know if it ever actually was finished in the end, but it was basically a retelling of the episode Insurrection Alpha, which was the episode where I think Seska, the holodeck one, where Seska's like a holodeck character and tries to kill, which is really cool. So that was a really cool single player mod. And then some of the other really interesting single player mods, there was the Virtual Enterprise from Next Generation that I recall, is where you could walk around the TNG bridge and engineering and some of the other TNG era decks, which I really enjoyed. And then I think there were some really cool graphics mods as well. When I say graphics mods, they're more like texture replacement mods, sound replacement mods that kind of dated the look a little bit. So there was definitely some cool stuff for single player, but yeah, the most of it was multiplayer maps and skins and things like that.
I mean, the Argus effect is one that comes to my mind, where they actually make a TOS era story up. I think the second part was finished a year ago, so I think the captain would know it better.
It's already 3 years when we interviewed him.
3 years. Getting old. Time flies. Yeah, but very different, definitely.
Also different is the Enterprise NX-01 demo.
Oh, yeah.
It's basically a recreation, I think, from Season 2... The Expanse.
Yeah, because there's that Klingon attack at the end of the episode.
Yeah.
And they expanded on what was happening in that episode by having the Klingons invade the Enterprise NX-01, and you act as a security member of the Enterprise crew, and you have to go around and drive off the Klingons who are invading. That was a demo, but I remember always being very impressed by how they had recreated the interior of the NX-01 so well from scratch. Obviously all the textures and models had to be done from scratch, and that was great. Never made it to a full release. And there was another mod which also got a demo release, and I'm really struggling to remember what it's called, which is weird because I had a small voice role in it, and it was
Freelancer?
Yes.
Made by Griffin Endurance, which is an unbelievable talent. He made some RPGX mods, maps, and yeah, you have to look him up. Sadly, most of his videos are gone, but he still has a website. He pushes the limit.
He really did push the limit of Elite Force with that mod, because it was part storyline, part virtual Voyager, part kind of Mass Effect to decide where you want your ship to go in the universe. And there would have been, I think the vision for it was there was going to be multiple planets you could visit, ways to customize your ship, all these other things which sound like really tall orders, but actually the demo showed that you could really achieve some of them. A massive project which I don't think really took off past the demo. It was still a good demo, it's still a decent sort of linear demo, worth playing if you can get your hands on it. And yeah, I had a small voice role on that. I couldn't remember what it was called for a minute there. Yeah, that was also like towards the end of the modding era of Elite Force. I think pretty much everything else was RPGX by this point.
It's so sad for me that RPGX basically made the best content for Elite Force, but we never could enjoy it on the holodeck, basically on HoloMatch. I wanted always those nice maps in an normal traditional FPS environment.
Yeah, some of them were fantastic. I think probably there were technical reasons why you couldn't port them. I expect you could probably, with the individuals that are here, probably could have found a way to make it happen. But I think where a lot of the Starship maps for RPGX used the turbolift mechanic from the expansion pack, which probably didn't have like an analog in the multiplayer. I think that probably would have caused issues, and some of the entities and effects that you could achieve by pushing buttons, they were very much specifically built for RPGX. So I don't know how compatible they would have been. I expect it could have been achieved with some work, but there probably wasn't the demand from the community and the clans in that era, because from my perspective, by sort of your 2007, 2008, 2009, it was more or less all RPGX in terms of the Elite Force clans and community. That was the major focus. Hardly anyone played HoloMatch traditionally anymore.
Yes, because I think Elite Force, it was surprisingly long active also on HoloMatch, not also RPGX. I mean, I still remember playing Elite Force and finding active players and servers where there were active players in the year 2008 and 9. I'm pretty sure there were still players actively playing HoloMatch. And I personally was in the clan area 51. And when we are going to be together later on the servers and playing, you will see my classical name tag. And we were a small clan. We were playing in leagues a bit. I still remember it must have started in 2003 that I started playing in those clans, and we would be playing according to the ELO system, and we weren't the best clan. And I think I actually got quite good aiming with time because I was playing it a lot. And our clan leader, he was a really nice guy. He was called Mad Mike. And he was a guy, he was like 20 years older than me, had this beautiful wife, and he was creating LAN parties in Bremen. And I remember then driving up from Stuttgart with some other guys who were playing Elite Force at that time, and who also happened to live in Stuttgart, who could take me with them in their car, and then we would go to North Germany, because Stuttgart is in the south, Bremen is in the north. It's probably 600 kilometers or 550 kilometers around this distance. That would be 300 miles. And then we would be playing there. And yes, he was employed at the post office in Bremen. And he had the ability to get a room there for the weekend. And then we were like 30, 40 people there from all over Germany, maybe a few Brits. I don't remember too well, I'm sorry. And we would be playing nothing else than Elite Force there as HoloMatch. Then they had those little competitions, and then we had Desi competitions, then we had clan competitions, then we had one-on-one combat, who has the better aiming on which maps, and
all without the excuse of the ping, because everyone had a ping of 5 or something, and it was my connection is fault.
And it was truly a LAN party that was focused on Elite Force.
I would love to have done a Elite Force LAN party. I'm sure they must have existed in the UK, but I never had the contact or knew.
Like a previous guest mentions, there is no other experience than being on a LAN party where when you cheat, you have the imminent danger of Coca-Cola coming in your direction. A 2-liter bottle in your face, that hurts.
As it should be. Well, I did do LAN parties for Unreal Tournament 99, and I hosted things like that. A lot of my friends were gamers, and still are, but they weren't necessarily into Elite Force. So I'll try and introduce them, and there are a few people like O2 Ian, who used to play HoloMatch, and a really good friend of mine. And so we would have like LAN parties together and play Elite Force. But for most of my other friends, I didn't get the opportunity to really play this game in that setting. But LAN parties are the best. And there's a sort of a lost era there. You don't really get that anymore. And still to this day, I'll have some friends over to play video games. We won't play Elite Force, unfortunately. It's just the wrong era now. But we'll play all sorts of different games and just be in physical proximity and having fun in person. Yeah. There's something really special about that. And I wish I could have done that for Elite Force, because that would have been a lot of fun. And I'd have an opportunity to put on my Starfleet uniform for once. So... You know, everyone's a winner.
I think that's interesting though, because as much as the internet has brought the world closer together, I think it's also brought us apart in some ways as well. And the fact that you don't need to get together into a LAN party to play a competitive shooter anymore. I guess esports is the closest thing like that you see these days. But yeah, I mean, you've not lived unless you've suffered through having to lug a CRT monitor and your big computer along to
Oh yeah,
wherever it was you were going to.
21-inch screen with some 25 kilos where you were hurting your back just getting it up in the next level of the building.
Well,
Yeah.
I know that the Insomnia Festival in the UK still does parties, and I went to one of those last year, which was a lot of fun. I think it would be difficult to try and convince them to do an Elite Force LAN party, unfortunately. But yes, there are still some places you can do them, and they are really good fun when you can.
I think that the most important,
lugging a lot of hardware around. Yes, there is that.
I think the really important part was always the community. You know, having your friends over, having a good laugh, eating pizza. Yeah, you know, taking a time off together. It was all in one go, and of course, also coming home with a lot of sleep deprivation.
I have a question to our German-speaking friends here. Did any of you go to the North Fight? The LAN party was called North Fight.
Nope.
No, doesn't ring a bell.
No, okay, that's a shame. It was quite big. I think I even announced it on Hazard Team that there's going to be the North Fight. And apropos hazardteam.de, I still have the server and all the files with the work page. It's just after
host it again.
3-4.
Yeah.
Well, like
my first reaction.
The big problem is after 3 or 4 Debian updates of the Linux distribution, you know, the PHP code doesn't run anymore.
Oh shit! Yeah.
You know, it's PHP code from 30 years ago, and PHP is much further. It's not easy to get this thing running again. But actually, all the data, it's also there. It just needs to be, it still needs to be put into working order.
Well, maybe the friendly neighborhood Skynet can help you.
Oh, okay. You mean AI? Okay.
Oh yes.
Okay. Yeah, don't get me started on AI.
Yeah, don't get me started either.
But a subject more serious, definitely you touched a few times. Not only the LAN parties were big, but also sometimes the tournaments. Did you guys play any tournaments? I know until 2008, 2009 there were some. I also know, Luke, you helped hosting one in around 2013?
I'm really trying to think back to that. I remember being involved in some tournaments, and I remember sort of playing. I don't remember hosting an Elite Force one, but I was involved in some of the tournaments. I absolutely am not the best player of Elite Force, so I wasn't like going to be scoring high in any of that. But yeah, they were still quite popular, even in the late 2000s. Yes, I'm trying to remember any more details about that. I'll think about that.
I remember the Electronic Sports League, the ESL. They were having the system for many games back then. It was not just Elite Force, it was just, for them, it was just database entry. Here's another game, here, they make a league for them. And they also had Elite Force, and we had clans playing Capture the Flag against each other. And so those clans could be ranked. And I talked about my clan, that was Area 51. With my guys, I don't have any contact anymore, to my shame, I have to admit. But my clan, we weren't the most ambitious clan, I have to say. I really loved playing on just open multiplayer servers, Capture the Flag in teams, and I would always try to switch to the underdog because it's much more fun to play for the underdog than just for the winning team. And I think I myself got quite good. I was then one of the better players in my clan. But it was okay for me because the social dynamic in the clan was so great. I was talking about this guy from Bremen who organized the LAN party. He was kind of like a second father figure for me. I have to say, he was such a nice guy. He also a Trekkie, I believe. I'm not quite sure. But it was great experience in this clan playing. And yeah, we did a couple of leagues. Then there was Desi integration. Disintegration, yes. That game mode went on my nerves a bit because you would always get disintegrated. It was like watching football. You play for like 30 minutes and not one goal is being made, and it's then always just one goal. You're being disintegrated even in your own half before you get to the other side.
Right, it's a fast-paced game mode.
Yes, and for each game you may be getting 1 or 2 flags. If you're lucky, and you would have to clench your teeth, and it was so frustrating. So I always liked all weapon capture the flag. That was always a game mode that I personally loved most, because you had this team play, you had to have this strategy, you had to strategize. When do you get the photon burst? So this player, he's better with the compression rifle or the U-mod. By the way, U-mod is actually absolute killer if you knew what you were doing. The photon burst was kind of overpowered, was used by many newbies because you always could score some splash damage on someone. And if you managed to hit directly, it was devastating, the hit. But this new mod, it required a bit more skill. But if you got the skill, you could devastate you guys. And so you had to strategize during those games. You had to say, okay, this guy is better with the photon burst, so don't just pick up the photon burst just yet, so that your clan mate behind you can pick up this photon burst. And I personally would always go for the compression rifle and U-mod, because those insta-hit weapons, this were actually my forte in all weapons. I just loved doing those. And I loved doing those not by camping, but moving all around, and this was the difficulty doing it. Hitting with those insta-hit weapons while you were moving, this was this great challenge. And so you had to strategize between all your different team members, and that's why all weapons for me was always the greatest mode of the game.
Yeah, what was everyone's...
Very good. I didn't have any of that strategy. I was just thinking I'd just go and grab anything and go and run.
Yeah.
I mean, ultimately, that's what it ended up being. But what was everyone's favorite weapon if they could get their hands on it?
Depends on the situation and on the map. I can easily tell you what the opposite. That I can tell you. That's a grenade launcher and the shotgun. The
ethereal weapon.
Yeah, those two I never really liked, but the rest depends on the situation. If you have a map where there are little obstacles, of course, the compression rifle, maybe the iMod. If you have a map where it's more close combat, I like doing the machine gun, Thetrion. And if you can get it, of course, the arc welder, but especially when there are many people, snap.
Devastating weapon. I liked the scavenger rifle because I like my spray and pray weapons, my SMGs. I do like the compression rifle too. That was I always end up classing them in my head as what type of weapon in real life are they, and so I liked just having an assault rifle. That's sort of multi-purpose. But I like the photon burst too. Yeah, that was you felt pretty powerful wielding one of those. So those are probably my go-to ones. The Tetron pulse rifles also similar reasons to the scavenger rifle. I like that.
We must not forget the photon burst was an essential utility for many maps.
Yeah.
Oh yeah.
Photon burst jumping. Yeah. You had to. There were many maps. I remember ST Voy number 2, where you could use a photon burst to get with 2 bursts from your own bridge with a flag.
Yeah.
Then you bunny hop over 2 pillars over the central barrier where you had to execute a second photon burst jump.
Yeah.
And then you would be almost on the opposite side of the bridge.
I used a bomb for that to kill myself.
Yeah, but this is actually something that never ceases to amaze me, how certain players really get artistic in their movement. I didn't even know it was possible with this game engine to do that particular move here, and they did this over and over and again, and you think, how are they going to do this? How do they do this?
This is what I was talking earlier about. This is from the Quake 3 community. You have the defrag community. Defrag do you know what defrag is from Quake 3? Has anyone an idea? Yeah.
Not by name.
Is it a weapon?
No. Defrag is a certain type of game mode where the goal is not to shoot up somebody, but to bunny hop and strafe jump and do photon jumps, so that you have smooth movement, moving around corners, getting from one end of the map to the other in the fastest possible way. So where it's just about the movement of the engine. You can find videos on YouTube of Quake 3. You can find some great videos where there are even Elite Force maps for this. So there's this map that just consists of platforms that are spaced in a certain way, and you have to start straight jumping just right so that you manage to hit all the platforms. You have to start, of course, you start slowly. And if you mess up, if you can't, at some point, don't hit the jump button at the right time, or you don't move the mouse correctly, you will fall off the next platform because you have to jump from platform to platform that is getting spaced out further and further. And if you do it right, you go to the end. And the whole map only consists of platforms where the difficulty gets harder and harder for you bunny hopping practice there.
And I do remember certain maps where I could train this kind of thing. For a noob, this is really difficult to do. And they're basically consisting of exactly that, just in a non-competitive way, where you can really try out and getting the jump right.
Exactly. The goal obviously was maybe for being more proficient when you play Capture the Flag, to be faster and be able to run away faster from your enemies who are hunting for the flag that you're carrying back home to your base. The problem here is there's a slight bug only in the ioQuake 3 engine, that I have to admit in the end that the floating point rounding mode is a tiny bit different, so that the movement is not exactly the same as it was back with the original Star Trek Voyager Elite Force.
Oh, so this is why I always fail. Okay.
Yes, so I believe those maps can only be really solved with the original Elite Force. Is my big is what I think. So don't hit yourself too hard if it doesn't work with ioQuake 3, IOEF, those kind of maps. But yes, so this is really deep down on the technical side. It has much to do with legacy Intel floating point unit from how it was built in the 1990s. That are actually still in your computer, I believe. Every computer, every Intel chip that is running your Windows today still have one of those very old floating point units from 30 years ago.
But there were also the other peculiarities about how the game works. I still remember not being able to get out of the trenches on this Capture the Flag Voy 1 or 2, I don't know which one.
Yes.
It was basically your frame rate is too low. Okay, what can you do?
Yes, exactly. The frame rate had influenced on the rounding, because when you have 125 frames per second, what ended up happening is that those floating point numbers that give you a position in the game would be rounded tiny bit differently for different frame rates. And I still remember when I started, that can't be. Why would the frame rate tell the game how high you're jumping? And there's this technical reason that floating points, when you add the vector 125 times per second instead of 80 times per second, then due to the way the code is written, the result ends up being different. So
you end up in a different location, in a different height, and you kind of skip that maximum height if the frame rate isn't right, and meaning, you can't jump as high. And so learning that is a revelation, because as a player you think, am I too dumb? I know I can do this alone, and when I'm online I can. No, this is just how the game works.
So was it better to have a higher frame rate than it was? Yes, you would have some kind of advantage by doing that. Yeah.
Yes, you had an advantage.
You can easily emulate this. You can make the game artificially limit the frame rate and try to make these jumps out of the trenches with 125 and do them, let's say, with 30. You will see definitely that there are situations when you simply can't make the jump anymore.
Well, yes. Back in the days, I had a really slow computer and had big problems. Couldn't get out the trenches because my graphics card was too slow. There are certain magic islands. I believe one was 75 frames per second. One was 125 frames per second. And then there's another magic number that is much higher, and that gives you insane movement if you have it. And that is, I believe it's somewhere around 200 something. It's really quite high, but there's another magic number that gives you insane movement and actually an advantage over other players.
the chat.
So my frame rate is when I next play it now. See what get Fraps back installed again and see what it says on the corner.
Yeah.
Oh, thanks. Thank you, chat. Yes, that's right. I think it was even 333. And the big luck was back in those days when we were still playing competitively. I believe you had to have an insane machine to even have a chance of reaching those frame rates. Obviously, these days, it's not a big problem anymore.
So it's another world now. But yeah, I remember this is completely off topic, but when I first played BioShock, I was playing it on a computer, which I think it was a laptop actually, which really wasn't supposed to play it. But I got it working, and I completed the entire game on 10 frames per second.
No. Yes, I remember those times.
Committed I was to wanting to finish BioShock and loving the world and all the lore of it, that I really wanted to play it, that I just stuck with it, and I still only died once. I was very proud of myself.
Yes, I did that too, but I was too proud to admit that I couldn't get my graphic settings too very high. In retrospect, I should have set medium or even low. I shouldn't have had the.
I probably should have lowered mine a bit, but that's a game. You want it to look nice.
I always wanted the textures to look crisp, so I made it always ultra high. And when it was 10 frames per second, I didn't care. You get used to it.
You do get used to it, yeah. Yeah.
I mean, there are limits. 10 is really you're taking a beating there.
You did very well, sir. You gave it 10 FPS with one death.
I was really, really frustrated with 25 or 30 in some RTS, and 10 in a shooter-like game is like, are you serious?
It was hard work, but it wasn't. You do get used to it. Obviously, now I play it on a much newer machine, and it's incredibly crisp and incredibly smooth. And I would never go back to that, and I would think, "What you idiot? What were you thinking?" But at the time, you get used to it, and you're having fun with it, so it doesn't matter. Obviously, with Elite Force, you can play that at a very intense speed now with modern machines. So
I think
see how that goes in a minute.
It is incredible to think, back in the early 2000s, just how different things were. Like how difficult it was to run games at that time, because I seem to remember Elite Force, Half-Life 2, Grand Theft Auto 3 on PC, all these games used to run. You needed good hardware at the time to run those games well. These days, the phone in my pocket can run all of this stuff at 400 FPS, right? It's incredible.
And I think on the flip side, it's also interesting to see which games could actually run on really slow hardware. I was working on a Riva TNT2 back then, and the game did run, but barely, but it did run. Imagining 32 megabytes of graphics RAM, that's nothing. And it did run. Today, a modern game, when we install it, you usually need some sort of medium graphics card, currently medium, unless it's not really fun. Yeah, okay. There's a huge gap in there in the meantime.
That is another topic about modern games and why they don't run as efficiently as perhaps they should.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I would say we maybe close off the legacy aspect of Elite Force and come also slowly to an end here, so we can play some rounds.
Yeah, sounds good.
So I would say let's move to the topic of what is currently active. Seven Saturn, you're the master stalker of Elite Force. You know a little bit about the servers. I think the Frag Cafe, at least in the past, was quite active. How is it now?
Yeah, I mean, they still do their events, but before you make any judgments, you must understand, okay, this isn't the player base it used to be. It's not like we have 50 players online at the same time. Won't happen today anymore. But so when I say okay, on a weekend there are maybe 5-6 players on a server, that's not too few, so to say. During our events we had some, let's say 15 guys, or maybe I think the peak was some 20, and this was a special event. So when you look at a server and you see 6 guys, okay, this is usually as much as it gets. Can be sometimes 7, sometimes 8, but don't be surprised if it is less. So and essentially it depends on what kind of game you want to play. There is basically a mod out there, a Gladiator mod, that is being played a lot. Personally, it's not my cup of tea, but people enjoy it. So standard issue EF is not
So
playing
yeah,
as much. I
Gladiator is
think.
the one where you have where you count the people out and they have to wait like 5 minutes until the last two have duked it out between themselves, right?
Kind of, but
Gladiator.
not the standard mode. There's also a standard EF mode that plays similarly to that. It's really its own mod, but there are servers that play plain EF. It's not like you don't find them anymore. They are just not as frequented as the others. And
Okay.
yeah, you have this separation, of course, into the US and Europe. You know, when I am off from work, let's say at 6 p.m. and I want to play a few rounds, that's not the same time as in the US, and this gap you have. And of course, the ping issue is still an issue as we discussed. So there is kind of a small separation. It's not like you never see anyone from the other side of the Atlantic, but for ping reasons, you will not enjoy it as much as if you stay on your own side.
I mean, I think from my perspective, it'll be like Elite Force will always have that nostalgia factor for a lot of people. For our generation, for people who are looking into sort of what are going to be considered retro Star Trek games, for people who are looking at those top 10 lists of best Star Trek games of all time on articles on the internet, and they're going to be like, okay, I'll check that out. I'll find that really cheap on GOG, and I'll buy that and I'll play it once, and I'll maybe check out the multiplayer. But obviously, at the age of 25, it's not a game that's going to be attracting too many new players that are in it for the long haul, in my opinion. So it really is a nostalgia factor. And I think that the positive is that it is going to be at the top of those lists, and people are going to check it out for the story. And for me, when I think of Elite Force, the two main things I think about are the single-player campaign and how well they used what they were able to get to create what they did. And also RPGX, which I think is the mod that had the most longevity and really evolved Elite Force into something it was never designed to be, and no one ever thought it could become, but still maintained a really successful community and created a lot of memorable moments for that community, a lot of memorable stories and characters, and people who, like us, are still connecting today over Elite Force.
Are there still RPGX players and events where RPGX?
I want to give a shout out to the Last Outpost community, because I think they are able to provide a standalone RPGX install for Elite Force. So you could play that without, and that was a free download. So you could install that and play RPGX without having Elite Force, owning Elite Force, having Elite Force installed. And so that was a really efficient way to get new players and to keep that community alive. So the last time I was really involved in anything to do with RPGX, it was through the Last Outpost. And they were a good community. I don't know how active they are now. They've probably moved on to other games. I know they were playing Star Trek Online at the same time.
I think sometimes you see the Order of Kalis running a server.
Right, okay.
Every now and then, I've seen them around.
Are there in other Star Trek games things that are similar to what RPGX has done? Does there exist something like that?
There's nothing that's like directly the same. Star Trek Online has that role-playing aspect, although it sometimes feels more like a Star Trek theme park than a living, breathing, world-building sort of universe.
Struggle to find myself immersed into that Star Trek Online kind of environment.
I like it a lot. I like Star Trek Online a lot. I don't play it often, but when I do, I like the effort they've put into the storylines. But it does sometimes feel like a series of greatest hits rather than something truly new. So I like Star Trek Online, and I would recommend trying it, but it's not like RPGX. RPGX is far more reliant on a community, on forums, on building a community outside of the game rather than finding a server that happens to have players, for example, if that makes sense. So, yeah, I don't think there's anything directly like it. I'd love there to be. I'd love, like I said before, there to be a Mass Effect style Star Trek game, because I think that there's some mileage in that format for Star Trek. But yeah, I don't think RPGX has got many communities running anymore, so it's going to be a nostalgia act, like I said.
My opinion on this, like for the future of Star Trek Voyager Elite Four specifically, is sort of echoing what you said, Luke, which is that it is always going to have its place in history as probably one of, if not the best Star Trek games of all time, certainly in the top 10, easy.
Mhm.
And I was over the moon to see the game released on GOG along with other classic Star Trek games, and it's nice to see them get a little bit of attention. I do have a little bit of hope because two events really. One, not so long ago, a couple of guys joined into our Discord server who started to ask about Elite Force and modding and Star Trek, classic Star Trek games. And for whatever reason, it came up in conversation that they were like 17, 18 years old. I was like, you were not born when this game was released. You were not conceived when this game was released. It's incredible.
Wow.
But as it turns out through things like Paramount Plus and like people being able to go back and discover the old Star Trek and kind of lead in from that from the newer Star Trek, I think there is a potential for an audience to kind of come and discover some of this older stuff if they really, really get into, especially Voyager. But what would be nice is maybe one day, and I don't know if it's possible or not, but it would be nice if one day, Voyager Elite Force got the remaster or remake treatment. It seems to be a trend these days. Like you see like Knights of the Old Republic and Tomb Raider and all these games getting kind of remastered or remade in some way. And I know it's a bit tricky with licensing and things like that, so I don't know if it will ever happen, but there's a part of me that hopes one day it might, because maybe that is a way to kind of bring people back into the... And there is actually a new Star Trek Voyager themed game being released, I believe, which is more of a fallout shelter kind of thing, I believe.
It actually looks quite good.
How is that possible? I'm sorry. I'm speaking from the perspective from someone who really fell out of gaming completely. I'm hardly gaming these days anymore. And the reason for this is because I moved out of my parents. It's simple as that. I never got around to get a full gaming PC setup since I moved out from my parents. I was only laptop based, and now I'm working full time. I'm done with university, but it has so many good memories. Elite Force has so many good memories, and what
it
you
really
just said what you said with the single player campaign, it's absolutely true. The thing is, I've been playing so much HoloMatch, so much multiplayer, that this is only a very small side story. But you're also right, in the grand picture, when these days people will always come back to playing Star Trek, but obviously it's not going to be HoloMatch, it's going to be the single player campaign, because this is a story that they can play on their own and that stands on its own, and it's not dependent on a big number of people being fortuitously interested at the same time in the same thing.
And there's no real way to know how many people are playing single player. Like that statistic is not tracked really. So for all we know, there are thousands of people playing that right now as we speak, but we just wouldn't know. But the fact that this new game, Star Trek Voyager Across the Unknown, I think it's called, the fact that there's interest in Voyager as a franchise does make me hopeful that there is potential for people to then go, oh, I really enjoyed that. I'll see what other Voyager games there are. Or maybe for a studio to turn around and go, yeah, maybe we should do a remake or a remaster of Elite Force, because Voyager as a franchise is kind of being rediscovered in the same way that Deep Space Nine was never popular at the time, but now because of streaming platforms and things, people love that show. So who knows?
I think that's a really good point. I know. I think that's a really good point where you're talking about viewers from Paramount Plus or Netflix or other streaming services who are now discovering it, and they fall in love with the characters and the story, and they want to see what's out there. And along with this being one of the better Star Trek games, there's more of a chance that they're going to check it out. Again, I do agree that it's probably going to be mostly a single player that holds the interest now. But you talk about licensing. To be fair, Star Trek Online has started to incorporate various parts of some of the Activision games into that game. I know the iMod is one of the weapons that you can now get in Star Trek Online. And really cool. I think recently, just in the last couple of weeks, they've announced that for one of their new events that you can participate in, the reward is the hazard suit. And seeing a picture of that, it is identical. The effort that's gone into that to make it look as authentic as possible is fantastic. So I wonder if the licensing issue is less of an issue now when it comes to at least the cosmetic side of it. I also know that it's the same for Star Trek Armada, because the USS Premonition from Star Trek Armada is also a ship available in Star Trek Online now, which
That's
is
really
again
cool.
really cool. And I think also the USS Achilles from Dominion Wars, I think.
There are many ships already from all the different games. Starfleet Command, Dominion Wars, Armada. It's a long list already.
So I do wonder if, at least on a cosmetic front, we can see some of these legacy items and characters maybe and vessels appear in other media, and that would be awesome if that was the case, because it just shows that this game has a legacy. Elite Force has a very important legacy, both in gaming, as we've talked about, in the Star Trek fandom, as we've talked about, and it's one that is still being talked about and being enjoyed today.
I would like to come back shortly back to you, what you said, File Tracker. Elite Force is such a great game for two reasons: because of the great story and because of the great Holo Match. They profited enormously of the work that ID Software did for their pretty simple shooter. It's not too hard. It's not difficult to understand. You can come in quick, you play your rounds, and they gave it a really nice Star Trek theme and didn't make the multiplayer mode more than it needed to be. And that carried really a long way, and seemed to have carried like that we have 25 years after the fact this discussion here. I'm really honored to be invited here, because I myself haven't been very active the last 15 years, and that after 15 years, that's, for me, it's, the French would say incroyable. That's I can't understand it, but okay, I'm so happy that I could play my part in this history here, and everybody here, Filefront, everybody has downloaded maps and mods from Filefront.
Oh yeah, Elite Force Files was a really big deal for me personally, exploring things beyond Elite Force Vanilla Edition, and also as an administrator of Elite Force Files at a certain point, one of the final ones. It was really great to be part of the community. I really enjoyed being on the forums and being part of a couple of clans and involving myself in the community side of things. I really don't think this game would still be talked about in the same way if it hadn't had those things. So yeah, I'm really thankful for being invited to talk about this today, and to be celebrating 25 years of what I personally consider my favourite video game, because it got me into gaming. And it's a Star Trek game, and Star Trek's one of my favourite things. So there's lots of layers to this for me. And yeah, it's amazing. 25 years.
Yeah, I was going to say one thing, actually. I bet the one thing you don't miss from being the admin on Elite Force Files was something called Ops. I don't know if you remember that.
What, the interface? yeah, let's not talk about that.
Ops was yeah, anyway, moving on. No, but yeah, it's been incredible to be to see that like the community is still so active and obviously much smaller than it was, but like the fact that so many people have that nostalgia and warm memories and the community that built up around this game is so incredible. And I think that's what Star Trek is all about at the end of the day. It's about community, and it's about the friends we make. It's about what was it, the quote from Voyager itself, it's not about the destination, it's about the journey, right? And the fact that I'm now looking at, because I didn't know this was a thing, but I'm looking now at the screenshots from the hazard suit from Star Trek Online, and the fact that that's a thing at all just makes me feel warm inside, that, you know, this thing is still alive in some way and people have such fond memories of it. So yeah, it's been really cool to reminisce with you guys.
Yes, yeah, I'll just add to that. Yeah, thank you for inviting us along. I would say I'm amazed how much I've heard that actually is still going on. I assumed that there was practically nothing, but seeing people that are still playing it, still interested in it, and yeah, also just the great memories of sessions gone by to look back on. Yeah, it was a very enjoyable time.
Thank you all joining me here. I'm, like many know here, I'm a big fan of preserving gaming history, and we have to do a much better job. It's just a small tip of the iceberg I'm doing on this channel, but Elite Force had such a huge clan history, for example.
Yes, that's true.
Has a team.de had a big clan list with all the links, all the clan names. All of this is dark. I so wish we could recover some of that information.
Oh, yeah.
But yeah, I definitely will be in touch with you all. I want to do separate videos, separate interviews. There's so much to store for the history for later, for the future.
Sounds good.
Are you a historian by trade?
No. I'm just a hobby nurse. I'm working in a hospital, and I'm now also active here on the YouTube front and archiving, especially retro gaming history. Doesn't only mean Star Trek, but in general.
I agree. I think that's so important that we do preserve this, because it's a little bit different to books or television shows. Gaming is something that is always going to have compatibility issues with the future. You aren't always going to be able to future-proof yourself, and all these communities and the forums and screenshots of things. I've got quite a few screenshots from my time with Elite Force Files and the communities I were a part of, and so I'm glad I've preserved that little bit of my slice of my perspective of Elite Force. So I do think it's important that we find some way to do that, because a lot of these things, a lot of games that are more niche even than Elite Force, are going to find themselves disappearing into history with little more than a Wikipedia article to show that they existed. And that's unfortunate, and that's really sad considering the work that went into a lot of these games. So it does deserve to be celebrated, and it does deserve to be preserved in some way.
Yeah, I mean, one of the reasons why we went to so much effort to, because I'm sure you guys remember the rocky road of Filefront and how it was nearly closed down many, many times, and
oh yeah,
many corporate takeovers and all this horrible stuff, and it took a lot of time and effort and frankly personal money to get the website back and to keep it alive. And the fact that it's still there today, obviously it's not what it used to be in a lot of ways, but it's it's important to me that we preserve all those mods and all of the forum posts and all of the things that happened in those days, because like you say, the thing with computers and the digital sort of realm is it's very what's the word, ephemeral. What happens in 20 years time when x86 64 processors are no longer that common? How do we keep this stuff running? Who's building emulators for these things? And you kind of see that with historical games, going back to Commodore and Amiga games and things like that, where it's good there's a community keeping that stuff alive, but on the flip side, there's so much lost to history that simply just doesn't exist anymore, and it's incredibly sad. So yeah, anything I or the community can do to kind of keep this stuff safe and preserved for the future is incredibly important.
I think it's often in the hands of the community, of the players, that stick with it this long. I remember there was one incident where Elite Force Files and all the file front, as was websites and hosting servers, were going to go down. They were going to get deleted. I can't remember the context of it. But there was such a great effort from the Elite Force community to download every single file, all the maps and mods and skins and the utilities even, and to have that backed up somewhere, even if it was just on people's computers, because we didn't want to lose that. Now, in the end, a lot of that was saved, and it wasn't an issue in the end, that particular time. But it
was thanks to those efforts, though. I just want to say, though, I do need to thank everybody in the community, because it is because of those efforts that so much stuff has been saved, because a lot of stuff was lost behind the scenes, and the only reason we've been able to restore most of that stuff is purely because of community efforts like that. So yeah, big shout out to everybody who's kind of contributed to that effort.
Definitely, absolutely. I mean, I still have a hard drive full of Elite Force files, which hardly ever get looked at, but I have them, and lots of other people do too. So in a way, that's how we're going to future-proof ourselves. It's in the hands of the communities of these games to preserve it, because no one else is going to.
Can I ask a question from purely the side of the user? Because the topic that you just started, it's actually also a very, very interesting topic in my view. And I'm wondering, this looked like a commercial operation that you were running back then on Elite Force Files, on Filefront. This was under the hood of probably some company, and you had to make this work financially. And I'm wondering, how can this even be in the remotest possible? Because while you just downloaded, were you soliciting donations? Were you having membership plans? What was the plan behind there?
Yeah, absolutely. So, I mean, this is a very long story, so this is maybe a topic for another podcast, but in a nutshell, the main thing is back in the 2000s, advertising was profitable. So the Filefront used to make plenty of money just purely through advertising revenue. Obviously, like in these days, it's not really possible to generate that much money through through advertising revenue. So,
Okay. Yes.
yeah. So the company was owned by a company called Defy Media up until it closed down in 2016, and that's when myself and Scott, who owns ModDB, stepped in and managed to buy it at the last minute. So,
Oh, you're also the ModDB guy. Oh my god, I didn't know.
I'm not the
I had no
ModDB guy.
idea.
I work with the ModDB guy.
Okay.
So I also work with those guys. But so we bought it. These days, frankly, it doesn't make any money. In fact, I spend my own personal money to keep that website going. So it's definitely not a profitable venture in any way, and it's more of a side thing and just trying to keep it alive.
I didn't want to know the whole history, so that's already fine for me. Thank you for the info. Thanks.
Normally, I would say this is the part where I open the mic to you guys, but we are over 3 hours, so we are already hitting the jackpot here. It's the longest running stream and video we will have on the channel. So I would say that's it for this video. Leave us a comment, tell us what you think about the game, and of course, play the game. Until next time.
Goodbye.
Bye.
Phases to frag.